The Republic medical frigate Mercy's Hand drifted through the Sullust sector's shipping lanes, its red cross markings illuminated against the void, a beacon of neutrality in a galaxy that had forgotten the meaning of the word. Inside its cramped medbays, 73 wounded clone troopers lay in Bacta tanks and on surgical tables, casualties from the grinding siege of Umbara. The frigate was unarmed by treaty, protected only by outdated diplomatic protocols that both sides supposedly honored. Commander Wolf of the 104th stood on the bridge, cybernetic eye-scanning sensor displays with growing unease. His remaining organic eye, scarred from the Battle of Abrigado, tracked 3 contacts emerging from hyperspace at the system's edge. "Captain, we've got company. Munificent-class frigates, bearing 27 Mark III. They're not transmitting identification codes." The Neimoidian captain, a medical corps officer named Drell, adjusted his elaborate robes nervously. "Impossible. This is a designated medical vessel. Even the Separatists wouldn't—" The first turbo laser bolt answered his objection, slamming into the frigate's port shield generator. Alarms shrieked. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in crimson warning. The Mercy's Hand shuddered as more fire raked across its hull, shields collapsing under sustained bombardment from weapons that should never have targeted a hospital ship. "They're jamming our distress beacon!" the communications officer shouted. "We're being systematically cut off." Wolf's jaw tightened. His pack, the 104th Battalion, was 3 systems away with General Plo Koon. The wounded clones in the medbays couldn't fight, couldn't evacuate, couldn't do anything but die if those frigates decided to finish what they'd started. And judging by the precision of the attack pattern, targeting engines, communications, weapons, the Separatists intended exactly that. Through the viewport, he watched vulture droids launch from the frigate's hangar bays, their distinctive silhouettes swarming toward the crippled medical ship like mechanical insects drawn to wounded prey. "All hands, prepare for boarding action," Wolf ordered, his voice cutting through the panic. "Medical staff, secure the patients. Combat-capable personnel, form defensive perimeters at airlocks Alpha through Delta." He knew it was futile. Maybe a dozen clones aboard could still hold a rifle. The rest were missing limbs, recovering from shrapnel wounds, or sedated in Bacta. Against an entire droid boarding party, they'd last minutes. The vulture droids strafed the frigate's hull, their laser cannons punching through weakened armor plating. Then came the real threat. Separatist boarding craft. Ugly disc-shaped vessels that clamped onto the hull like parasitic organisms. Cutting torches began their work, burning through durasteel with industrial efficiency. Wolf positioned himself at airlock Alpha, DC-15 carbine raised, flanked by 6 troopers who'd pulled themselves from medical beds despite protest from the droid surgeons. Blood seeped through hastily applied bandages. One clone, Comet, was missing his left arm below the elbow, the stump wrapped in synth flesh. Another, Sinker, had shrapnel scars across his face and a pronounced limp. "Brothers," Wolf said quietly as the airlock door began glowing red from the cutting torches, "it's been an honor." The door exploded inward. Battle droids poured through the breach like a metallic flood, B-1s in the front ranks, followed by heavier B-2 super battle droids with wrist-mounted blasters already firing. The clones opened up with everything they had, their disciplined fire dropping the first wave. But there were always more. Always more droids, always more firepower, always more death marching toward wounded soldiers who'd already given everything for a republic that treated them as expendable. Wolf's carbine overheated. He switched to his sidearm, dropping 2 more B-1s before a super battle droid's wrist rocket detonated against the corridor wall. The shockwave threw him backward, slamming his head against bulkhead plating. His vision doubled. Through ringing ears, he heard his brothers screaming, heard the mechanical march of droid feet advancing over clone bodies. Then he heard something else. A sound that didn't belong in this galaxy. A metallic ring that sang like a bell struck in perfect pitch. The super battle droid that had fired the rocket suddenly had a circular shield embedded in its chest. The droid sparked, convulsed, and toppled backward. The shield ricocheted off 3 more droids in sequence, each impact precise, calculated, devastating, before returning to the figure who'd just landed in the corridor behind the Separatist boarding party. Captain America stood in full uniform, shield on his arm, blonde hair matted with sweat and dust from whatever battlefield he'd just left. Behind him came Rex, Fives, Jesse, and a dozen other deserters, clone troopers who'd chosen freedom over obedience and now fought for something beyond Republic orders. "Sorry we're late," Steve said, his voice carrying that Brooklyn accent Wolf had heard in scattered intelligence reports. Traffic was hell. Then he charged into the droid formation like a guided missile wrapped in red, white, and blue. The corridor became a killing ground, but not for the clones. Steve moved with superhuman speed, his shield deflecting blaster bolts that would have cut through armor. He threw the shield, and it became a weapon of impossible geometry, striking droids at angles that violated conventional physics, ricocheting with mathematical precision, always returning to his hand. A super battle droid tried to grab him. Steve used its arm as leverage to flip over its back, smashing the shield down on its central processor with enough force to cave in the reinforced plating. Rex and his team moved with him in perfect synchronization. Their tactics evolved beyond Republic doctrine. They fought as Mandalorian warriors now, every movement efficient and brutal. Fives dropped a thermal detonator into a cluster of B-1s, then used the explosion's cover to slide beneath a super battle droid and sever its leg hydraulics. Jesse's dual pistols sang, each shot finding processor cores with clone-bred accuracy. The boarding party that should have slaughtered wounded clones instead found itself trapped between Captain America's fury and clone deserters who'd learned what it meant to fight for brothers rather than orders. "Commander Wolf," Rex called out, helping the 104th Commander to his feet. "You hit?" "Nothing fatal," Wolf grunted, accepting a fresh carbine from one of Rex's team, his cybernetic eye focused on Steve, who was currently using his shield to deflect a super battle droid's wrist rockets back into its face. "That's really him, the Sentinel. Intelligence said he was dead." "Intelligence says a lot of things," Rex replied, firing past Wolf's shoulder to drop a commando droid attempting to flank them. "Most of them are lies." The last droid fell, its vocabulator sparking garbled protests before going dark. Steve lowered his shield, breathing hard, checking his team for casualties. One clone, a deserter named Tracker, had taken a glancing blaster shot to the shoulder, but Kix was already applying emergency treatment. 68 more wounded clones in the medbays, Wolf reported, limping forward. "The Separatist frigates are still out there. Even if we repel boarders, they'll just keep shooting until this ship breaks apart." Steve looked at Rex. Something passed between them. Veteran soldiers communicating in the language of shared experience and desperate odds. Then Steve turned back to Wolf. "How many functional escape pods does this ship have?" "Maybe 20. Not enough for everyone, and half the wounded can't be moved without killing them. Then we hold the ship." Steve's voice carried absolute certainty, the kind of confidence that made soldiers believe in impossible victories. "Rex, take your team and secure the other airlocks. Make sure no more boarding parties get through. Wolf, get your combat-capable troops organized. We're going to teach the Separatists why attacking medical ships is a war crime." "Sir," Wolf said carefully, "with respect, we're outnumbered, outgunned, and this ship has no weapons. How exactly do we fight 3 frigates?" Steve Rogers smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd stormed Hydra facilities alone and come out victorious. "We don't fight the frigates, we take one." The war room aboard the Separatist flagship Invisible Hand hummed with tactical displays and holographic projections. Count Dooku stood before the central console, his elegant profile illuminated by blue light as he studied footage that had been transmitted from a dozen battlefields across the Outer Rim. His curved lightsaber hilt rested at his belt, untouched but ever present, a reminder of the refined lethality he'd mastered over 7 decades. The hologram showed Captain America in motion, deflecting blaster fire on Ryloth, evacuating civilians from Onderon, breaking Imperial supply lines on Kashyyyk. Each clip demonstrated impossible combat efficiency, no force sensitivity, no midi-chlorian enhancement, just enhanced physiology, tactical brilliance, and that infuriating shield that defied every principle of known metallurgy. "Remarkable," Dooku murmured, freezing the image on Steve's face. Determined, focused, absolutely uncompromising. 3 months since our conversation on Quen Station. He's become significantly more problematic. Behind him, the chamber doors hissed open. General Grievous entered, his mechanical body clanking with each movement, 4 arms hanging at his sides like bladed shadows. The cyborg general's yellow eyes fixed on the hologram with predatory interest. His vocabulator crackled with barely contained aggression. "This is the primitive you wanted me to see?" Grievous rasped, circling the projection. "The Republic's failed experiment. He fights like a Jedi but carries no lightsaber. He leads clone deserters like some pathetic revolutionary." He stopped, hunching forward to study Steve's combat stance. "I could crush him in seconds." "Could you?" Dooku asked mildly, advancing the footage to show Steve throwing his shield through 6 super battle droids in one throw, the weapon ricocheting with impossible precision before returning to his hand. "Watch carefully, General. He doesn't just fight. He adapts. Every battle he learns. His tactics evolve. The clones who follow him have become twice as effective as their Republic counterparts." Grievous waved dismissively with 2 of his 4 arms. "Clones are weaklings. Flesh is weakness. This Captain America," he spat the name like a curse, "is just another organic who will break when I apply sufficient pressure. Perhaps." Dooku zoomed in on the shield, its star emblem gleaming even in battlefield chaos. "But he's become a symbol, General. Refugees speak of him as a savior. Clone deserters flock to his cause. Worse, he's making the Jedi look incompetent. While they serve a corrupt Senate, he actually protects people. The Republic can't tolerate that kind of competition." A new hologram materialized, Chancellor Palpatine's hooded figure, transmitted from Coruscant. Dooku and Grievous both turned toward the projection, though only Dooku bowed with genuine reverence. Grievous merely straightened, his mechanical body creaking. "Master," Dooku said quietly. Palpatine's voice carried the weight of ancient malevolence wrapped in grandfatherly concern. "Count Dooku, General Grievous, I trust you've been studying our problematic visitor from another world." "He's an annoyance," Grievous growled. "Nothing more. Give me 1 battalion, and I'll bring you his head within a week." "Your enthusiasm is noted, General. But Captain Rogers represents something far more dangerous than his combat capabilities suggest." Palpatine's image leaned forward, shadows deepening around his eyes. "He's incorruptible. I've had agents attempt to turn him, offering power, purpose, revenge against the Republic that branded him a terrorist. He refuses every overture. Worse, he's teaching clone troopers to think for themselves, to question orders, to value their own lives. The inhibitor chips will handle the clones when the time comes," Dooku said. "Will they?" Palpatine's tone sharpened. "The clones exposed to Roger's influence show increased resistance to conditioning. Several have already removed their chips. They're teaching others how to do the same. If this spreads, if enough clones begin questioning their programming, Order 66 becomes compromised." The chamber fell silent. Even Grievous understood the implications. The entire grand design, the Clone Wars, the Jedi's destruction, the Republic's transformation into empire, hinged on the clone army executing Order 66 without hesitation. If Captain America's philosophy spread far enough, it could unravel decades of Sith planning. "What do you propose, Master?" Dooku asked. "Captain Rogers must be eliminated, publicly, decisively, in a manner that destroys the hope he represents." Palpatine's hologram turned toward Grievous. "General, you will challenge him directly. Make it personal. Broadcast your intentions across Republic and Separatist channels. Force him to face you or watch innocent people die." Grievous's vocabulator crackled with what might have been laughter. "Finally, a worthy hunt. I will mount that shield on my wall alongside my other trophies." "Do not underestimate him," Palpatine warned. "He's survived encounters with Jedi Masters, destroyed Separatist facilities the Republic couldn't touch, and evaded capture for months. He's dangerous precisely because he operates outside every system we've constructed to control Force users and soldiers." "He's not a Jedi," Grievous said dismissively. "He has no Force powers to surprise me with, no precognition to predict my strikes. He's just an enhanced human with a shield. I've killed hundreds of Jedi. This will be simple." Dooku exchanged a glance with Palpatine's hologram, both Sith Lords recognizing the arrogance in Grievous's words, but also understanding its utility. The cyborg general's confidence would make the challenge seem genuine, not a desperate move by threatened Sith. "Make the challenge spectacular," Palpatine instructed. "Target civilian populations Rogers has protected. Force him to come to you. When he does, General Grievous, you will demonstrate what happens to those who oppose the natural order of this galaxy." "And the Jedi?" Dooku asked. "They'll certainly try to interfere." Palpatine's smile was invisible but audible in his voice. "The Jedi Council is already debating Rogers' threat level. I've ensured they view him as a destabilizing element, someone who inspires dangerous individualism in the clone army. When Grievous challenges him, the Jedi will be grateful to have the problem resolved. They may even assist." The hologram flickered. "Proceed, General. Make Captain America's death a lesson the galaxy will not forget." The transmission ended. Grievous turned to Dooku, all four arms spreading in anticipation. Finally, real prey. Not politicians in their Senate chambers or Jedi hiding behind clone meat shields. A warrior who stands and fights. "Don't let your enthusiasm cloud your judgment," Dooku cautioned. "Rogers has something neither Jedi nor Sith possess. Absolute moral clarity. He knows precisely what he fights for and never wavers. That kind of conviction makes men dangerous." "Conviction doesn't stop lightsabers." Grievous activated his wristcom, his vocabulator projecting across the Separatist command network. "Prepare my personal cruiser. Full droid complement. Magna Guards, commando droids. The new enhanced super battle droid prototypes. I want Rogers to face an army before he reaches me." "Where will you make your stand?" Dooku asked. Grievous pulled up a star map, his mechanical claws tapping coordinates. "Ord Mantell, the refugee settlement Rogers established 3 weeks ago. 2,000 civilians, mostly freed slaves and clone deserters' families. He's made them vulnerable by gathering them in one location." His yellow eyes gleamed. "I'll give him 24 hours to surrender himself. For every hour he delays, I'll execute 100 refugees. Let's see if his precious principles survive watching innocents die for his cowardice." Dooku nodded slowly. Cruel, but effective. Rogers would come. His psychology profile guaranteed it. The man couldn't ignore suffering, couldn't let others die in his place. It was simultaneously his greatest strength and most exploitable weakness. "One more thing," Dooku said as Grievous turned to leave. "The shield. That vibranium metal is unique to his universe. It shouldn't exist here. Yet somehow it does, and it's indestructible by any weapon we possess. Don't assume your lightsabers will cut through it. Then I'll cut through him instead." Grievous's mechanical laughter echoed through the war room as he departed, already planning the hunt that would add Captain America to his collection of fallen warriors. Alone now, Dooku returned to studying the hollows. He paused on an image of Steve standing among freed slaves on Zygerria, shield slung across his back, surrounded by grateful people whose chains he'd broken. The former Jedi Master felt something he rarely experienced, a twinge of regret. In another life, another galaxy, he might have respected this Captain Rogers. The man embodied principles Dooku once held sacred: justice, honor, protection of the innocent. But this wasn't another life. This was the culmination of Darth Sidious's masterwork, the destruction of the Jedi, the transformation of the Republic, the birth of a Sith empire that would rule for millennia. Rogers was an aberration, a variable that threatened carefully laid plans. Personal respect was irrelevant against such stakes. "Forgive me, Captain," Dooku whispered to the hologram. "You chose the wrong galaxy to be a hero in." He deactivated the display and began composing orders. Increased surveillance on known Rogers sympathizers, bounties on clone deserters, pressure on refugee settlements across the Outer Rim. If Grievous failed, unlikely but possible, there would be backup plans. 20 backup plans. The Sith had waited 1,000 years for this moment. One enhanced soldier from another dimension wouldn't derail destiny. Meanwhile, on Coruscant, in the Senate building's highest tower, Palpatine stood alone in his private chamber. No advisors, no guards, just the Dark Lord of the Sith, contemplating the bored state of his grand game. The Force swirled around him, dark and potent, showing possible futures. Most showed Rogers dying on Ord Mantell, cut down by Grievous in a display that would terrify resistance movements across the galaxy. But a few timelines, thin, improbable threads, showed something else. Rogers surviving. Rogers inspiring more deserters. Rogers somehow interfering with Order 66's execution. Those threads needed to be cut. Palpatine activated his personal comm, bypassing official channels entirely. "Commander Fox, this is the Chancellor. I have a classified assignment requiring your utmost discretion." Across the city planet, in the Jedi Temple, Master Mace Windu stood before the council chamber's window, watching endless traffic streams flow between skyscrapers. Behind him, Masters Yoda, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Plo Koon debated the Rogers situation with increasing urgency. "A threat to military cohesion he has become," Yoda said, his ancient voice troubled. "Question their purpose, clone troopers do. Dangerous, such thinking is in time of war. He's also saved more civilian lives in 3 months than some Jedi generals manage in a year," Plo Koon countered. "Perhaps Rogers sees something we've become blind to, that this war has corrupted our principles." "We serve the Republic," Mace said, not turning from the window. "Rogers serves only his own conscience. That makes him unpredictable, dangerous, or free," Plo Koon said quietly. The statement hung in the air, unaddressed because addressing it would require the Council to examine uncomfortable truths. So they moved to safer ground: strategy, tactics, the practical problem of a super soldier operating outside their authority. "The Chancellor has requested we consider direct action," Ki-Adi-Mundi said. "Capture or neutralize Rogers before he destabilizes the clone program further." Mace finally turned, his expression carved from granite. "I'll handle it personally. If Rogers can be reasoned with, I'll bring him in peacefully. If not..." He let the implication hang. "Careful, you must be," Yoda warned. "Powerful warrior Rogers is. Underestimate him, we must not." Mace Windu's hand moved to his lightsaber. "I've faced Sith Lords and survived. I can handle one enhanced soldier, force-sensitive or not." He left without waiting for dismissal, his purple blade calling for action in a galaxy drowning in complex moral compromise. Mace Windu had always seen the world in clear terms: light and dark, Republic and Separatist, order and chaos. Rogers threatened that clarity by existing in spaces between, by proving that sometimes the right choice meant defying both sides. That made him more dangerous than any Sith. The Separatist data facility on Mustafar floated above rivers of lava like a technological fortress built atop hell itself. Heat shimmers distorted the black stone architecture, and the air tasted of sulfur and scorched metal. It was the last place anyone would expect Captain America to infiltrate, which made it the perfect target for a man who'd made a career of doing the impossible. Steve clung to the facility's underside, magnetic grips on his boots, and one hand keeping him anchored to the superheated durasteel plating. His shield was strapped to his back, and sweat poured down his face despite the environmental suit's cooling systems. Below him, lava churned like an angry god's cauldron, waiting to incinerate anything that fell. "Cap, you're insane," Fives whispered through the secure comm. He and Jesse were positioned 3 kilometers away with sniper rifles, providing overwatch from a volcanic ridge. "That plating is reading at 200 degrees. Your boots are going to melt." "Then I better move fast," Steve replied, pulling himself hand over hand toward the ventilation intake. The facility processed intelligence from across Separatist space, troop movements, encrypted communications, strategic plans. But Steve wasn't here for military intelligence. He was here because 3 days ago, a freed Geonosian slave named Clickirk had whispered something terrifying. "The Separatists have files on you. Where you came from, how you arrived." Steve had dismissed it initially. The Separatists couldn't know more about his arrival than he did. It had been random, a dimensional rift that shouldn't have existed. But Clickirk had been insistent, traumatized, desperate to repay the man who'd freed him from Poggle the Lesser's workshops. They know something about Earth. That single word, Earth, had hit Steve like a physical blow. In 3 months, fighting across this galaxy, he'd almost convinced himself his world didn't exist anymore, that he was trapped forever in this alien place. But if the Separatists had information about Earth, about how he'd arrived. He reached the ventilation shaft and pulled a small plasma cutter from his belt. The tool, salvaged from a destroyed commando droid, made quick work of the grating. Steve slipped inside, his enhanced physiology allowing him to navigate the claustrophobic tunnel system that would have killed normal humans from heat exhaustion. The facility's interior was cooler, maintained at temperatures suitable for Neimoidian and battle droid operations. Steve emerged in a maintenance corridor, quickly dispatching 2 B-1 patrol droids with precise shield strikes before they could raise alarms. He moved through the shadows, his super soldier senses tracking guard patrol patterns, camera blind spots, pressure plate locations. The central data core occupied the facility's heart, a massive chamber filled with towering servers and holographic displays showing real-time intelligence feeds. Steve watched from an overhead catwalk as tactical droids processed information, their mechanical voices discussing fleet movements and battlefield analyses. But what caught his attention was a sealed chamber adjacent to the main core. Restricted access, heavy security, no droid traffic. The door bore unusual markings, Project Wormhole, authorized personnel only. Steve's heart hammered. Wormhole. Dimensional breach, the same phenomenon that had brought him here. He descended silently, using the catwalk's shadows to avoid detection. 2 IG-100 Magna Guards stood at the sealed chamber's entrance, Grievous's personal guard droids, far more dangerous than standard battle droids. They carried electrostaffs crackling with energy, and their programming included advanced combat algorithms capable of dueling Jedi. Steve had fought Magna Guards before. They'd nearly killed him twice. He threw his shield from the shadows. It struck the first Magna Guard's head with enough force to decapitate the droid, but the body remained standing, electrostaff sweeping defensive patterns even without optical sensors. The second Magna Guard's photoreceptors locked onto Steve's position instantly, its vocabulator emitting a shrill alarm that echoed through the data core. "So much for stealth," Steve muttered, charging forward. The headless Magna Guard attacked with disturbing precision, its backup sensors compensating for the lost head. Steve blocked an electrostaff strike with his shield, feeling the energy discharge arc across the vibranium without effect. He pivoted, using the shield's edge to sever the droid's arm, then drove the shield through its central processor with pile-driver force. The second Magna Guard split its electrostaff into two weapons and attacked in a whirlwind pattern. High, low, middle strikes, so rapid they blurred together. Steve's enhanced reflexes barely kept pace, his shield deflecting strikes that would have electrocuted him through his armor. He caught one electrostaff between the shield and his armored forearm, using the leverage to yank the Magna Guard off balance, then kicked it into the nearby server banks with super soldier strength. Sparks exploded. Alarms blared throughout the facility. Steve had maybe 2 minutes before reinforcements arrived. He activated the plasma cutter on the sealed door, burning through security locks with desperate speed. The door hissed open, revealing a small laboratory filled with holographic projections, technical schematics, and, impossibly, a fragment of technology that looked almost Earth-like. Rounded edges, different metallurgy, design philosophy that didn't match anything he'd seen in this angular utilitarian galaxy. Steve approached the central console, fingers flying across controls he barely understood. The holographic display activated, showing technical readouts in Aurebesh script. His 3 months in this galaxy had given him functional literacy, enough to pass the horrifying truth emerging from the data. Project Wormhole, analysis of extra-dimensional incursion. Subject, Stephen Grant Rogers, designation Captain America. Origin point, dimensional rift, coordinates arrival. Method, forced trans-universal displacement via experimental Separatist hyperspace weapon. Steve's blood went cold. The room tilted. Not random chance, not cosmic accident. They brought him here. He scrolled frantically through the files, his enhanced mind processing information at superhuman speed. Technical schematics showed a massive hyperspace disruptor, a weapon designed to destabilize hyperspace lanes by tearing holes in dimensional barriers. The Separatists had been testing it, trying to create impassable regions that would cripple Republic supply lines. Instead, they'd punched through to another universe, to Earth, to the moment Steve had been returning the Infinity Stones. Side effect analysis. Subject. Rogers pulled through dimensional barrier during weapon test. Rift sealed immediately. Replication attempts unsuccessful. Subject trapped in target universe with no viable return mechanism. They'd ripped him from his timeline by accident, destroyed his only chance to return home, and they'd been studying him ever since, tracking his movements, analyzing his enhanced physiology, trying to understand the super soldier serum that gave him abilities beyond baseline human parameters. Worse, much worse, were the attached files. Kaminoan research proposals, genetic sampling authorizations signed by Count Dooku himself. Plans to integrate Steve's DNA into clone production, creating enhanced soldiers with his strength, speed, and healing factor. The same nightmare he'd destroyed on Kamino, now resurrected as Separatist black site research. Current status. Project suspended due to Subject Rogers' security compromise of Kamino facility. Recommend termination of subject and acquisition of genetic material post-mortem. Steve's hands shook as he downloaded everything onto a data chip. Evidence. Proof. But proof of what? That he was a weapon fought over by 2 corrupt governments? That his arrival had been weaponized, his existence reduced to genetic material both sides wanted to harvest? Behind him, the laboratory door exploded inward. Commando droids poured through, sleek, dangerous, built for silent assassination. These weren't the clumsy B-1s, or even the heavy B-2s. These were Separatist special operations units, and they moved with lethal coordination. Steve threw his shield, taking down 3 droids in one throw, but there were a dozen more. Blaster fire filled the laboratory, destroying equipment, and setting sensitive documents ablaze. He caught the returning shield and used it to deflect incoming fire while backing toward the room's far wall. His mind raced through escape routes. The ventilation shaft was compromised. The main entrance was blocked. That left the window, overlooking a 200-meter drop into molten lava. "Fives, I need an extraction," Steve said into his comm, already running toward the window. "Now would be good. Cap, you're 3 clicks from our position and surrounded by lava." "I know!" Steve crashed through the transparasteel window, shield first, glass exploding around him as he fell into Mustafar's hellish atmosphere. Wind screamed past his ears. Heat scorched his exposed skin. The lava river below rushed up to meet him with terminal velocity. Then, a LAAT gunship materialized from the volcanic smoke, its side door open, Jesse leaning out with a magnetic grapple cable. "Catch!" Steve snagged the cable one-handed, his enhanced strength allowing him to hold on despite the sudden deceleration that would have torn a normal man's arm from its socket. The gunship's engines screamed, pulling up and away from the facility as turbolaser fire erupted from defensive emplacements. They made it to the volcanic ridge where Fives had their escape shuttle waiting, Rex already powering up engines. Steve collapsed into the crew compartment, chest heaving, the data chip clutched in his burned hand like a talisman. "Did you get what you needed?" Rex asked, the shuttle lifting off as Separatist fighters scrambled from the facility's hangars. Steve stared at the data chip, his mind still processing the revelation. "Yeah, I got it. And we need to have a very serious conversation when we get back to base." The hidden moon base the deserters called home, a hollowed-out asteroid in the Smuggler's Run, felt smaller than usual as Steve assembled everyone in the main chamber. 37 clone deserters, refugees they'd rescued, a handful of freed slaves learning to fight. All of them looked to Captain America as their leader, their symbol, their hope. Steve stood before them, still wearing his scorched uniform, and told them the truth. "They brought me here on purpose," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "The Separatists were testing a hyperspace weapon. They accidentally tore open a rift to my universe and pulled me through. It wasn't fate, it wasn't the Force, it was a weapons test gone wrong." Silence. Then Five spoke, his voice tight. "So this whole time, you've been fighting a war you were dragged into against your will?" "I've been fighting because people needed help," Steve corrected. "That hasn't changed, but you all deserve to know. I'm not some mystical answer to this galaxy's problems. I'm just a soldier who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time." "That's not true, sir," Rex said quietly. He stepped forward, removing his helmet so everyone could see his face, identical to every other clone's, yet uniquely his through scars and experience. "You could have stayed quiet, kept your head down, tried to find a way home. Instead, you stood up for us when no one else would. You showed us we were more than property. That choice, that's what makes you Captain America, not how you arrived." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jesse nodded. Hardcase actually saluted, something the deserters rarely did anymore, having abandoned military formality. Even the refugees, beings from a dozen species who'd been rescued from slavery and separatist brutality, looked at Steve with renewed determination. "There's more," Steve said, holding up the data chip. "Both the Republic and Separatists want my genetic material. They want to make super soldier clones. They're willing to kill me to get it. And," he paused, the weight of this revelation crushing, "according to these files, there's something in the clone army, something called inhibitor chips, biological control devices implanted in every clone trooper's brain." The deserters went rigid, Rex's face drained of color. "What kind of control?" "The files don't say exactly. but the Separatists flag it as a critical vulnerability they could potentially exploit. Whatever these chips do, they're not there for the clones' benefit. Kix, the medic who'd saved dozens of lives since joining the Resistance, stepped forward, his expression haunted. "Sir, I need to examine some of our brothers. If there's something in our heads we don't know about." "Do it," Steve said. "Carefully. If these chips are what I think they are, if they're programmed triggers, removing them wrong could kill you. Better dead than controlled," Fives said flatly. Every clone in the room nodded agreement. Steve looked at the faces surrounding him. Men who'd been bred for war, refugees who'd been enslaved, people who'd found freedom through collective resistance against impossible odds. They were his responsibility now, not because he'd asked for it, but because he'd stood up and they'd followed. "Here's what we know," Steve said, bringing up the holographic display. "The Separatists created the weapon that brought me here. They can't replicate it, so I can't get home. Both governments want me dead or captured for genetic research. The clone army has some kind of control mechanism we don't understand. And..." He pulled up the final file, the one that made his stomach turn. "General Grievous has issued a galaxy-wide challenge. He's threatening the refugee settlement on Ord Mantell. 100 executions per hour until I surrender myself." "It's a trap," Rex said immediately. "Obviously. You can't go." "I have to." Steve met Rex's eyes. 2,000 people, Rex. Families of deserters, freed slaves, children. I won't let them die because Grievous wants to draw me out." "Then we all go," Jesse said. "The whole resistance. Hit Grievous with everything we've got." "No." Steve's voice carried command authority that brooked no argument. "Grievous wants me specifically. If I bring all of you, he'll kill the hostages anyway, just to prove a point. This has to be clean. Me for them." "That's suicide," Fives protested. "Grievous has killed dozens of Jedi. You're not even force sensitive." "Neither is he," Steve pointed out. "Just a cyborg with lightsabers. I've faced worse." "When?" Rex demanded. "When have you faced 4 lightsabers wielded by someone specifically designed to kill Jedi?" Steve didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. He hadn't. This would be the hardest fight of his life, against an enemy designed to counter warriors more powerful than him, in a situation where victory meant surviving long enough for hostages to escape. "I'm going to Ord Mantell," Steve said with finality. "You're going to evacuate as many refugees as possible before I arrive. And if I don't make it back..." He looked at Rex. "You lead them. You keep fighting. You show this galaxy that clones are men, not property. Promise me." Rex's jaw worked. Finally, he nodded once. "I promise. But sir, you better come back. These brothers need you. I need you." Steve clasped Rex's shoulder, the gesture carrying weight that words couldn't. Then he turned to Kix. "How long until you can examine those inhibitor chips?" "Give me 12 hours. I'll scan Fives first. If anyone can survive complications, it's him." "Do it. We need to know what we're dealing with." Steve looked at the assembled resistance. His resistance, though he'd never wanted the title of leader. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we evacuate Ord Mantell and I face Grievous. After that..." He trailed off, uncertain. After that, everything changed. The Separatists knew he couldn't go home. The Republic wanted him dead. Grievous was coming for him personally. And somewhere in the shadows, Steve sensed a larger game being played, pieces moving on a board he couldn't fully see, manipulated by players whose endgame remained hidden. He retreated to his quarters, a small compartment barely large enough for a bunk and footlocker. Alone, finally, Steve pulled out the battered photograph he'd carried since 1945. Peggy Carter smiled at him from across universes, frozen in a moment of happiness they'd never actually shared. He'd been returning the Infinity Stones, trying to have one dance, one moment of peace after everything he'd sacrificed. Instead, he'd been ripped from his timeline and dumped in a galaxy even more broken than his own. "I'm sorry, Peg," he whispered to the photograph. "I tried to come back. I really did." The photograph offered no answers. It never did. But holding it reminded Steve of what he fought for, not governments or ideologies, but the simple belief that everyone deserved the chance to choose their own path, to live free from tyranny, to dance when the war was over. Even if he never got that chance himself, he'd make sure others did. Tomorrow, he'd face General Grievous. Tonight, he'd remember why fighting impossible battles was worth it, because someone had to stand. And Steve Rogers had never learned how to do anything else. Coruscant's lower levels smelled of ozone, refuse, and desperation. The perpetual twilight 3 kilometers below the Senate district was where people came when the Republic forgot them. Immigrants, criminals, clone deserters who'd removed their armor and tried to disappear into the masses. It was also where Mace Windu tracked Captain America's last known contact. The Jedi Master moved through the crowds like a shadow, his brown robes concealing his identity, his connection to the Force muted to avoid detection. Intelligence suggested Rogers had been here 2 days ago, meeting with clone sympathizers who smuggled deserters off-world. Mace intended to be there for the next meeting. He found the safe house in an abandoned warehouse district, rusted Durasteel walls, broken windows, the kind of place authorities ignored. Outside, 2 figures stood guard, clone deserters, judging by their posture and identical builds beneath civilian clothes. They spotted Mace approaching and immediately reached for concealed weapons. "Easy," Mace said, hands visible and empty. "I'm here to talk." "Jedi," one guard spat. His face bore scars from geonosis, and his eyes held the haunted look of men who'd seen too much death. "You're not welcome here." "I'm looking for Captain Rogers. I need to speak with him." "He's not here." "I know, but he'll come if you tell him a Jedi Master is waiting. Alone, unarmed." Mace opened his robe, showing his lightsaber hanging peacefully at his belt. "I give you my word. I'm here to talk, not fight." The guards exchanged glances. One spoke into a concealed calm. Minutes passed in tense silence. Finally, the door opened and Steve Rogers emerged, shield strapped to his back, uniform worn but clean. His blue eyes assessed Mace with tactical precision. "Master Windu," Steve said carefully, "didn't expect the Council to send their best." "The Council didn't send me. I came because someone needs to end this before it gets worse." Mace gestured to the warehouse. "Can we talk inside?" Steve considered, then nodded. "Search him." The guards patted Mace down professionally, finding only his lightsaber, which they confiscated. Steve led the Jedi Master into the warehouse, where a dozen more deserters watched with rifles ready. Rex stood among them, his modified armor painted in Resistance colors. "5 minutes, Steve said, arms crossed. "Then you leave." Mace studied the space. Makeshift bunks, salvaged equipment, holographic maps showing refugee extraction routes. These weren't terrorists. They were soldiers trying to save lives outside official channels. It reminded him uncomfortably of his own youth, when the Jedi had been less institutionalized, more willing to challenge authority. "You're making powerful enemies, Captain Rogers," Mace began. "The Chancellor considers you a threat to Republic security. General Grievous has issued a death warrant. The Jedi Council debates your fate at every session. How long do you think you can survive with the entire galaxy hunting you?" "As long as it takes," Steve replied. "I've been hunted before." "By your own government?" "Yes, actually." Steve's expression didn't change. "When I refused to compromise my principles for political convenience. Turned out I was right and they were wrong. Sound familiar?" Mace's jaw tightened. "The Republic isn't perfect, but it's the legitimate government of 1,000 systems. Without it, there's only chaos. Without it, there's freedom." Steve countered. Real freedom, not the kind you get by breeding slave armies and calling it service. The clones volunteered. One man volunteered his DNA. The rest were grown in tubes and conditioned from birth to obey orders. That's not volunteering, Master Windu. That's slavery with better marketing. The words hit like physical blows. Mace had heard similar arguments from Plo Koon, from more liberal council members who questioned the clone army's ethics. He dismissed them as peacetime philosophy, unsuited to wartime necessity. But hearing it from Steve, a soldier who'd fought in his own galaxy's wars and still maintained moral clarity, made the arguments harder to ignore. "What would you have us do?" Mace asked, genuine frustration bleeding through. "The Separatists have unlimited droids. Without the clone army, the Republic falls. Billions die under Separatist occupation. Is that preferable? I'd have you give the clones citizenship, rights, the promise of lives after the war. Treat them as the men they are instead of equipment you deploy." Steve stepped closer, his voice intense. "You're Jedi, guardians of peace and justice. When did you become enforcers for corrupt senators who treat sapient beings as property? When the alternative was letting the Republic burn," Mace said quietly. "You don't understand the complexity." "I understand perfectly. You made a deal with the devil and told yourselves it was necessary. I've seen this story before, Master Windu. It never ends well." Steve pulled out a data chip, tossing it to Mace. "The Separatists have been studying me. They want my genetics to create super soldier clones, but there's more on that chip. Evidence of inhibitor chips implanted in every clone trooper. Biological control mechanisms. Did the Council know about those?" Mace's blood went cold. "Inhibitor chips? You didn't know?" Steve's expression softened slightly, seeing genuine shock on the Jedi Master's face. "Neither did your clone commanders. Someone put control devices in their brains without telling anyone. Want to guess who benefits from an army that can be switched on and off like droids?" Mace activated the data chip. Technical schematics filled the holographic display. Biological implants, activation protocols, override codes buried in classified Kaminoan archives. His hands shook. The implications were staggering. An army of millions, all with hidden vulnerabilities, all potentially controlled by whoever held the activation codes. "The Chancellor authorized the clone program," Mace said slowly, his mind racing through scenarios. "The Kaminoans reported directly to him during development. If these chips were installed without Jedi oversight, then someone's been planning to use your army against you," Steve finished. "And you've been too busy fighting the war to notice." Silence filled the warehouse. Rex and the other deserters watched Mace Windu, legendary Jedi warrior, council member, champion of the Republic, process information that shattered his worldview's foundation. "Why show me this?" Mace asked finally. "You could have kept it secret, used it as leverage." "Because despite everything, I don't think you're evil. Compromised, yes. Blind to uncomfortable truths, absolutely. But not evil." Steve retrieved his shield, checking the straps with practiced efficiency. "I'm going to Ord Mantell tomorrow. Grievous challenged me personally. 2,000 hostages die if I don't show. I probably won't survive." "It's a trap." "Obviously, but those people don't deserve to die for separatist theatrics." Steve met Mace's eyes. "After I'm gone, someone needs to investigate those chips. Someone the Council will listen to. That's you. And if I arrest you right now, bring you back to the Council, prevent this suicide mission?" Steve's hand moved to his shield. Around the warehouse, clone deserters raised rifles. Mace sensed their determination through the Force. These men would die protecting Rogers. It would be a bloodbath. "You won't," Steve said confidently, "because you're starting to realize I might be right. About the clones, about the Republic, About whatever conspiracy those chips represent. You need time to investigate, and you can't do that while the Council pressures you to hunt me. Mace studied the man before him. No force sensitivity, no supernatural powers, just enhanced physiology and unshakable conviction. He'd faced Sith Lords, dark side assassins, and Count Dooku himself. Yet, this soldier from another universe posed a different kind of challenge, moral rather than physical. If you survive Ord Mantell, Mace said carefully, the Council will demand your arrest. I can't protect you from that. I'm not asking for protection. I'm asking you to do your job. Protect the innocent. Starting with the clone army you've been using as disposable soldiers. Mace picked up his lightsaber, which the guards returned reluctantly. He walked to the door, then paused. Captain Rogers, the Force doesn't touch you. I can't see your future, but I hope it's longer than tomorrow. Me too, Master Windu, me too. After the Jedi left, Rex approached Steve. Think he'll actually investigate? Yeah, Steve said. He's a good man caught in a bad system. The evidence will eat at him until he has to act. He checked his chronometer. How long until Kix finishes examining those chips? Another hour. Fives is sedated. Kix found something and he's being careful about extraction. Steve nodded. 1 hour. Then they'd know exactly what kind of control mechanism had been planted in millions of clone brains. Then they'd evacuate Ord Mantell. Then he'd face Grievous in combat that would probably kill him. Just another day in a galaxy far, far away. The medical bay in the asteroid base hummed with salvaged equipment, scanners stolen from Republic ships, surgical tools liberated from Separatist facilities, and Kix's steady hands working with the precision that had kept dozens of brothers alive against impossible odds. Fives lay sedated on the operating table, his head immobilized in a neural stabilizer, while holographic displays showed cross-sections of his brain. Steve stood in the observation room with Rex, watching through transparent steel as Kix manipulated micro-surgical instruments with breathtaking delicacy. The inhibitor chip, barely larger than a grain of rice, glowed red on the holographic scan, nestled against Five's frontal lobe like a parasite. How many of you have these? Steve asked quietly. Every clone, Rex said, his voice hollow. We were told they were behavioral modification chips, supposed to prevent aggressive tendencies, keep us stable under combat stress. We never questioned it, his hands clenched into fists. We never thought we needed to. On the operating table, Kix made an incision with laser precision. The microscanner fed real-time data to the holographic display, showing neural connections threading from the chip into Five's brain tissue like roots. Removing it wrong would cause catastrophic damage, stroke, paralysis, death. Steady, Kix murmured to himself, using a neural disruptor to carefully sever connections one by one. Come on, brother, stay with me. Minutes stretched into eternity. Steve had faced Nazis, Hydra, and Thanos himself, but watching surgery on a man who trusted him, who'd followed him into desertion and exile, felt worse than any battle. If Fives died because Steve had insisted on investigating these chips, the chip came free. Kix deposited it in a sterile container and immediately began sealing the incision, biogel and synthetic tissue closing the wound. Five's vital signs remained stable. The room collectively exhaled. Got it, Kix announced, exhaustion and triumph mixing in his voice. He held up the container, the tiny chip visible inside. Someone want to tell me what this thing actually does? Steve entered the medical bay as Kix transferred the chip to an analysis terminal. Rex joined them, along with Jesse, Hardcase, and a dozen other deserters who'd gathered after hearing about the surgery. They all stared at the terminal as data scrolled across the screen, biological programming, neural activation protocols, encrypted command structures. It's a control mechanism, Steve said, reading the technical specifications with growing horror. Designed to override free will when specific codes are transmitted. Orders coded into genetic memory that bypass conscious thought. What kind of orders? Jesse asked. Steve found the relevant file and felt his stomach turn. Execute Order 66. Terminate all Jedi. Execute Order 65. Remove the Supreme Chancellor. Execute Order 64. Capture Republic leadership. He scrolled through dozens more. There are contingency orders programmed into every clone. Your living weapons with remote activation codes. The medical bay fell silent. Clone deserters stared at each other. Brothers who'd fought together, bled together, now discovering they'd been designed as sleeper agents from birth. The betrayal cut deeper than any battlefield wound. "Who has the codes?" Rex finally asked, his voice dangerous. "According to this, they're held by the Supreme Chancellor himself, Palpatine." Steve met Rex's eyes. "Your army reports to the Jedi, but your kill switches belong to a politician." "That's insane," Hardcase protested. "Why would the Republic build in mechanisms to kill its own Jedi?" "Because the Republic didn't build the clone army," Steve said, pieces clicking together. "The Separatists showed me files on Mustafar. The clone program was ordered by a Jedi Master 10 years ago, Master Sifo Dyas, who died shortly after. But the Kaminoans were paid by someone. The inhibitor chips were added by someone. The whole army appeared exactly when the Republic needed it most, with built-in control mechanisms that give one man absolute power over millions of soldiers." "Palpatine," Rex breathed. "The Chancellor controls the most powerful army in the galaxy, and no one knows it. Except us." Steve gestured to the deserters. "You removed your identification chips when you deserted, but these inhibitor chips remained. If Order 66 is ever transmitted, every clone in the Republic will murder their Jedi generals." Kix finished, his face ashen. "Millions of brothers, forced to kill the people they've been fighting beside for 3 years. They won't even know why they're doing it." The implications cascaded through the room like falling dominoes. The Clone Wars suddenly looked different. Not a legitimate conflict between Republic and Separatists, but orchestrated chaos designed to centralize power. Create an army with kill switches. Militarize the Jedi. Wait for the perfect moment to activate Order 66 and eliminate the only force capable of opposing a dictator with an invincible military. "We have to warn the Jedi," Jesse said. "With what proof?" Steve countered. "The chip I downloaded from Mustafar. They'll say it's Separatist propaganda. Kix's surgical findings. They'll claim we tampered with evidence. We're deserters, terrorists in the Republic's eyes. They won't believe us until it's too late." "Then we remove the chips," Rex said with finality. "Every clone we can reach. We spread the word through underground channels. Brothers start deserting, getting the chips removed, becoming free men instead of remote-controlled weapons." "That takes time we might not have," Steve warned. "Grievous's deadline is in 18 hours. After I face him, if I survive, the galaxy's attention will be elsewhere. That's your window." "Sir," Rex started. "No arguments, Captain. You're the one who taught me what being brothers means. Now I'm being a brother, covering your escape while you save millions from becoming murderers." Steve pulled up a holographic star map. "Here's the plan. Ord Mantell has 2,000 refugees, mostly families of deserters and freed slaves. You evacuate them before I arrive. Use every ship we've got. Scatter them across the outer rim. No single target for retaliation." "And you?" Kix asked. "I buy you time. Grievous wants a public execution, proof that opposing the Separatists is suicide. He'll drag the fight out, make a spectacle. That gives you hours to evacuate." Steve's jaw tightened. "If I win, great. If not, You carry on without me." Fives stirred on the operating table, sedation wearing off. His eyes opened, unfocused, then sharpened as awareness returned. "Cap, did Kix get it out?" "Yeah, brother," Steve said, moving to the table. "You're free now. No chips, no programming, just you." Fives tried to sit up, wincing. "The others, every clone in the army. We will," Rex promised, gripping his brother's shoulder. "But first, you recover. You're no good to anyone with your brain scrambled." Over the next 6 hours, the base became organized chaos. Ships were prepped for evacuation, stolen transports, salvaged freighters, anything capable of hyperspace. Clone deserters packed essential supplies while refugees prepared to scatter. Children who'd known nothing but the asteroid base's safety clung to parents, sensing the urgency even if they didn't understand the danger. Steve worked alongside them, helping load cargo, checking ship systems, offering reassurance to terrified refugees who'd already been uprooted too many times. A Twi'lek mother whose children he'd rescued from Zigarian slavers approached with something wrapped in cloth. "For you, Captain," she said in accented basic, pressing the bundle into his hands. "For bringing us freedom." Steve unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a hand-stitched banner, red and white stripes, blue field with stars, recreated from descriptions he'd shared during long nights around the base's communal fires. The American flag, sewn by refugees from a dozen species who'd never seen Earth but understood what it represented. Hope for something better. "I can't accept this," Steve said, throat tight. "You already did," the Twi'lek replied. "You carried it in your heart when you broke our chains. Now carry it on your back when you face the monster." Steve folded the banner carefully and secured it to his uniform's shoulder strap, a symbol from one galaxy carried into battle in another. Around him, refugees and deserters worked with quiet determination, their actions speaking louder than words. This was what he fought for. Not governments or ideologies, but people helping people, brothers standing together, freedom earned through sacrifice. Rex found him as the last transport prepared to launch. "Sir, the evacuation's 90% complete. Another hour and Ord Mantell will be empty except for skeleton defenses." "Good. Make sure—" "I'm not leaving," Rex interrupted. "Neither are Fives, Jesse, Hardcase, or Kix. We're going to Ord Mantell with you." Rex, "No, sir. You taught us that brothers don't abandon brothers. You're walking into a fight designed to kill you. If you think we're letting you do that alone, you don't know clones as well as you think." Rex's expression was carved from Durasteel. "We're coming. That's not negotiable." Steve wanted to argue, to order them away, to protect the men who'd become his family in this alien galaxy. But looking at Rex's face, at the faces of every deserter who'd gathered behind him, Steve recognized something he'd seen in mirrors his entire life. The absolute determination to stand for what's right, even when standing meant dying. "Fine," Steve said. "But if this goes bad, you evacuate. No heroic last stands. The resistance needs leaders, and that's you." "Deal," Rex lied. They both knew if Steve fell, none of them were leaving without him. The last transport launched toward hyperspace, carrying refugees to safety. The asteroid base felt empty now, echoing with absence. 15 clone deserters remained, volunteers who'd chosen this fight knowing the odds. They checked weapons, painted fresh markings on armor, said quiet prayers to gods from planets they'd never visited but hoped existed. Steve stood before them in the hangar, shield on his arm, the improvised American flag visible on his shoulder. These men had followed him into exile, trusted him with their lives, become more than soldiers. They'd become brothers in every sense that mattered. "Grievous is going to throw everything at us," Steve said. "Droids, traps, overwhelming force. He's designed to kill Jedi, and we don't have the Force. But we have something better. We have each other. We fight as brothers. We protect each other. And no matter what happens, we make sure those refugees stay safe." "Sir," Hardcase spoke up, grinning despite the suicidal mission ahead. "One question. When we win, and we will win, can we paint your shield symbol on our armor? Make it official?" Steve smiled despite the weight crushing his chest. "Yeah, Hardcase. You can paint whatever you want. You're free men." They boarded the last gunship, the Defiant, named by Rex for what they'd all become. As the ship broke atmosphere and jumped to hyperspace, Steve looked back at the asteroid base one final time. Maybe they'd return. Maybe this would be their last flight. Either way, they were going to Ord Mantell to face a monster, knowing full well they might not survive. But that was what heroes did. They stood when others couldn't. They fought when victory seemed impossible. They sacrificed so others could live free. Steve Rogers had done it in his own galaxy. He'd do it in this one too, even if it killed him. The broadcast hijacked every Republic and Separatist communication channel simultaneously, a feat requiring resources only a major military power possessed. Holoscreens across Coruscant flickered, showing General Grievous standing amid the ruins of Ord Mantell's refugee settlement. Behind him, 2,000 civilians knelt in organized rows, guarded by battalions of battle droids and Magna Guards. The cyborg general's yellow eyes blazed with predatory hunger. "Citizens of the Republic," Grievous rasped, his vocabulator crackling with mechanical menace. "I address you regarding the terrorist known as Captain America, the criminal who subverts your clone army, destroys Separatist facilities, and spreads chaos across civilized space." He gestured with one clawed hand to the hostages. "These people harbor deserters. They give sanctuary to Republic traitors. They follow a false hero who offers nothing but empty promises." The camera focused on a Twi'lek child crying in her mother's arms, on an elderly human man, former slave, trembling with fear, on clone families, wives and children of deserters who'd sought freedom. "Captain Rogers," Grievous continued, "you have 24 hours to surrender yourself. Every hour you delay, I execute 100 hostages, starting now." He ignited a lightsaber, green blade humming with lethal energy, and advanced toward the first row of prisoners. The broadcast cut to black before showing the executions, but the screams transmitted clearly enough. In the Jedi Temple, the Council watched in horrified silence. Mace Windu's hands gripped his chair's armrests with enough force to crack the wood. Obi-Wan Kenobi closed his eyes, feeling the deaths through the Force, innocent lives snuffed out for Separatist propaganda. "We must respond," Ki Adimundi said. "Deploy forces to Ord Mantell, rescue the hostages. By the time we arrive, thousands will be dead," Plo Koon countered. Grievous chose the location specifically, 6 hours from the nearest Republic fleet. "Then what do we do?" Anakin demanded, pacing like a caged predator. "Let him murder civilians while we debate?" Yoda's ears drooped. "Give Grievous what he wants, Captain Rogers might. A trap this is, but see another path I do not." On Coruscant's lower levels, Mace Windu watched the broadcast alone in his quarters. The data chip Steve had given him sat on his desk, its information about inhibitor chips eating at his conscience. The Kaleesh warrior was orchestrating a massacre to draw out one man, and that man would probably come, would sacrifice himself for strangers because his moral code allowed no other choice. Mace activated his comlink. "This is Master Windu. I'm taking a personal shuttle to Ord Mantell. No backup, no authorization, just me." "Master Windu," the Council's comm officer protested. "The Chancellor has forbidden Jedi intervention without Senate approval." "Then don't tell the Chancellor." Mace ended the transmission and ignited his lightsaber, checking its purple blade. If Rogers was walking into a trap, the least Mace could do was even the odds slightly. Across the galaxy on Mustafar, Count Dooku watched Grievous's broadcast with calculated satisfaction. The cyborg was playing his role perfectly. savage enough to terrify, disciplined enough to maintain the hostage situation. Rogers would come. The enhanced soldier's psychology profile guaranteed it. "Magnificent," Dooku murmured. "Grievous truly believes he'll win this fight." "And if he doesn't?" a holographic figure asked. Darth Sidious materialized, his hooded face barely visible in shadow. Then Captain Rogers becomes even more dangerous, a symbol of resistance who defeated our greatest warrior. Either outcome serves our purposes, Master. If Grievous wins, Rogers is eliminated and clone deserters lose their inspiration. If Rogers wins, the Republic sees him as an even greater threat, and the Jedi Council has no choice but to hunt him seriously. "What about the inhibitor chip information?" Sidious asked. "Rogers acquired files from Mustafar. If that data reaches the Jedi, it won't matter. Even if they investigate, we control the narrative. The chips were installed for the clones' protection, behavioral stabilization. Any suggestion otherwise is Separatist misinformation." Dooku smiled coldly. "The Jedi want to believe the best of the Republic. They'll accept comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths until the moment Order 66 is transmitted." Sidious's hologram flickered. "Ensure Grievous makes Rogers' death memorable. The galaxy must see what happens to those who defy the natural order." The transmission ended. Dooku returned his attention to the tactical display showing Ord Mantell. Grievous had positioned his forces expertly. Kill zones, overlapping fields of fire, droid reinforcements staged in orbit. Even if Rogers brought his entire resistance, they'd be slaughtered. And if Rogers came alone, as his psychology suggested he would, Grievous would tear him apart in minutes. Either way, the Sith won. The Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at Ord Mantell's edge, running silent with all non-essential systems powered down. Through the viewport, Steve saw the planet's green continents and blue oceans. A beautiful world, now hosting a nightmare. Republic and Separatist ships monitored the system, neither interfering per the hostage agreement. 15 Separatist frigates in high orbit, Rex reported from the pilot's seat. Droid fighters on patrol, and that, he highlighted a massive cruiser, is Grievous's flagship. He's taking this seriously. Steve studied the tactical display. The refugee settlement was on the continent's northern coast, surrounded by plains offering no cover. Grievous had chosen his battlefield well. Nowhere for hostages to run, nowhere for rescuers to hide, perfect sightlines for droid snipers. "How do you want to play this?" Fives asked, checking his rifle. "Simple. You drop me on the settlement's outskirts. I walk in alone, challenge Grievous publicly. While he's focused on me, you extract hostages using underground tunnels. The settlement was built on old mining infrastructure. There are exits 3 kilometers south." "And when Grievous realizes the hostages are escaping?" Jesse asked. "He won't, because I'll keep him busy." Steve strapped his shield tighter. "The entire point is making this fight personal. Grievous wants to prove Separatist superiority by killing me publicly. I give him that fight while you save lives." "Sir," Kick said carefully, "Grievous has killed 73 Jedi in personal combat. He's faster, stronger, and has 4 lightsabers. You're walking into a fight you can't win." "I've walked into those before." Steve managed a slight smile. "Sometimes you win anyway." The gunship descended through Ord Mantell's atmosphere, its stealth systems hiding them from Separatist sensors. They landed 5 kilometers from the settlement in a forested valley. Steve checked his gear one final time. Shield secure, uniform intact, the improvised American flag still visible on his shoulder. Rex grabbed his arm before he could disembark. "Sir, Steve, if this goes bad, if you need extraction, we're coming. Brotherhood means not leaving anyone behind." "I know, Rex. I'm counting on it." Steve clasped his forearm in the Mandalorian gesture they'd learned together. "Keep our people safe. That's all that matters." He dropped from the gunship and started walking toward the settlement, alone. just a man with a shield against an army. Because that's what heroes did when innocence needed saving. The grasslands stretched endlessly, golden in Ord Mantell's afternoon sun. Steve walked openly, making no attempt at stealth. Separatist scout droids spotted him immediately, their reports feeding back to Grievous's command center. Good. He wanted the cyborg's full attention. The settlement appeared on the horizon. Prefab buildings arranged in defensive clusters, now surrounded by droid battalions. Steve saw the hostages clearly, families huddled together, clone children crying for fathers who'd deserted to give them freedom, elderly refugees who'd survived slavery only to face execution for someone else's crimes. Battle droids formed a corridor, hundreds of B-1s and B-2s creating a path toward the settlement's center. Steve walked through them, shield on his arm, every sense alert for ambush. The droids tracked him with weapons, but didn't fire. Grievous wanted him alive for the spectacle. The settlement's main square had been converted into an arena. Droid forces ringed the perimeter, their weapons trained inward. Hostages were positioned around the edges, human shields ensuring no Republic rescue attempt. And in the arena's center stood General Grievous. The cyborg general was more terrifying in person than Holovid suggested. Nearly 7 feet tall, hunched but radiating lethal potential, his duranium body modified with Kalish design aesthetics that made him look like a mechanical demon. 4 arms hung at his sides, each capable of wielding a lightsaber. Yellow eyes blazed with predatory intelligence. "Captain America," Grievous rasped, his vocabulator turning words into threats. "You actually came. I expected you to send your clone pets. Demonstrate your cowardice." "Let the hostages go," Steve said, positioning himself in the arena's center. "You wanted me. Here I am. Oh, I'll release them. After I've displayed your corpse across every Republic world. After I've proven that your primitive weapons and outdated ideals mean nothing against Separatist superiority." Grievous's claws clicked together. "I've killed 73 Jedi, Captain. Warriors enhanced by the Force itself. You're just an enhanced human with a shield. This won't take long." Steve raised his shield. "Then stop talking and start fighting." Grievous's vocabulator crackled with mechanical laughter. "Bold. I appreciate that. It makes the hunt more satisfying." He ignited 4 lightsabers simultaneously, green, blue, yellow, purple, stolen from Jedi he'd murdered. The blades hummed with lethal energy, casting multicolored light across the arena. Around them, hovercams activated, broadcasting the fight across the galaxy. Republic citizens would watch. Separatist systems would watch. The Jedi Council would watch. Everyone would see what happened when someone challenged the Separatist war machine. Grievous attacked like a whirlwind. 4 lightsabers striking from impossible angles, his mechanical body moving with speed that defied its bulk. Steve's shield blocked the first 3 strikes, but the 4th came low, forcing him to leap backward. The lightsaber carved through dirt where he'd been standing, superheating soil into glass. "Too slow!" Grievous taunted, pressing the attack. His 4 arms worked independently, each lightsaber following different patterns, creating a sphere of lethal energy that should have been impossible to defend against. But Steve had trained against impossible odds his entire life. His enhanced reflexes tracked all 4 blades, his tactical mind processing attack patterns faster than thought. He blocked high and low simultaneously, using the shield's curvature to deflect strikes at angles, never letting the lightsabers maintain contact long enough to test vibranium's limits. Grievous switched tactics, his legs splitting apart in disturbing spider mode. He scuttled sideways with inhuman speed, attacking from unexpected vectors. Steve threw his shield, the weapon ricocheting off Grievous's shoulder plating before returning to his hand. The impact barely dented the duranium armor. "Impressive toy," Grievous snarled. But toys break. He brought all 4 lightsabers down in a combined overhead strike, enough force to shatter stone. Steve caught the blades on his shield, the impact driving him to one knee. Energy crackled across vibranium, the lightsaber's plasma unable to cut through, but the kinetic force still overwhelming. Grievous pressed down, mechanical strength trying to crush Steve beneath impossible weight. Around the arena, hostages screamed, droid guards raised weapons ready to execute if Steve showed any sign of help arriving. Through the pain, through the crushing pressure, Steve saw Twi'lek children hiding behind their mothers, saw elderly humans who'd survived slavery now facing death, saw the families of clone deserters who'd only wanted freedom. He thought of Peggy, of Bucky, of every person he'd fought to protect across 2 galaxies and 80 years. Not today. Steve surged upward with super soldier strength, throwing Grievous backward. The cyborg stumbled, yellow eyes widening in surprise at the raw power. Before he could recover, Steve charged forward, shield first, slamming into Grievous's torso with enough force to dent armor plating. The fight was on. Grievous recovered with mechanical precision, his 4 arms spinning lightsabers in defensive patterns that created a wall of plasma. Steve circled, shield raised, looking for openings in the cyborg's defense. The arena's dirt was scorched black from lightsaber strikes, the air shimmering with heat distortion. "You're stronger than expected," Grievous admitted, his vocabulator crackling, but strength means nothing without speed. He dropped to all 6 limbs, 4 arms, 2 legs, and charged like a mechanical predator. Steve barely dodged, rolling sideways as lightsabers carved through space where he'd been standing. Grievous's claws tore gouges in the earth, his yellow eyes tracking Steve's movement with predatory focus. He lashed out with 1 leg, the kick catching Steve's ribs with pile-driver force. Steve felt something crack, pain exploding through his torso as he was thrown backward into the arena's perimeter. Battle droids raised their weapons, ready to finish him, but Grievous held up 1 clawed hand. "No, he's mine." The cyborg advanced slowly, savoring the moment. "I want the galaxy to see this." The great Captain America, broken and bleeding, begging for mercy he won't receive. Steve forced himself upright, tasting copper. His enhanced healing was already working on the cracked ribs, but the pain was still white-hot. Through blurred vision, he saw Rex and Fives at the arena's edge, disguised as battle droids, slowly working toward hostage positions. The rescue operation had begun. He just needed to keep Grievous focused on him. "I don't beg," Steve said, spitting blood. "And I don't break." He threw his shield with desperate force. Grievous blocked with 2 lightsabers, but Steve had aimed for the distraction. While the cyborg's attention tracked the shield, Steve charged, sliding under Grievous's guard and driving his fist into the General's unarmored gut, the organic part remaining from his Kalish origins. Grievous howled, the sound distorted through his vocabulator into something inhuman. He brought all 4 lightsabers down in a rage-fueled strike, but Steve had already rolled away, catching his returning shield. The lightsabers carved a crater where he'd been. "You dare!" Grievous snarled. "You dare strike my living flesh! Just returning the favor!" Steve's voice was steady, despite the pain radiating through his chest. He noticed movement at the arena's edge, hostages being quietly ushered toward underground tunnels by clone deserters in stolen droid armor. 100 evacuated. Then 200. Grievous was too focused on the fight to notice. The cyborg general split his arms, wielding lightsabers in wide arcs that forced Steve into constant defensive movement. Green blade high, blue blade low, yellow and purple striking from the flanks. It was like fighting 4 opponents simultaneously. Steve's shield blocked, deflected, redirected, but each impact sent shockwaves up his arms. Even vibranium had limits when the force behind strikes came from mechanical actuators designed to overpower Jedi. Grievous feinted with his upper arms, then struck with his lower pair. Steve blocked high but took a glancing lightsaber blow to his left shoulder. The plasma burned through his uniform, searing flesh. Steve gritted his teeth against the agony, refusing to scream, refusing to give Grievous the satisfaction. "You're slowing," Grievous observed, circling like a mechanical vulture. "Blood loss, broken bones, burned flesh. How much longer can you stand, Captain? How much more can that inferior organic body endure?" Steve's vision tunneled. 300 hostages evacuated. 400. Half the civilians were safe now, disappearing into tunnels, while droid guards remained fixated on the arena. He just needed more time. Just a little more. "As long as it takes," Steve said, raising his shield. Blood ran down his arm, his ribs screamed with every breath, but he stood. Because that's what heroes did. Grievous attacked with renewed fury, all 4 lightsabers creating a storm of plasma. Steve blocked desperately, his enhanced reflexes the only thing keeping him alive. The shield deflected strike after strike, but the accumulated damage was overwhelming. His left arm hung nearly useless, the shoulder wound making it agony to maintain his guard. Then Grievous changed tactics. He threw 2 lightsabers like spinning discs of death while attacking with the remaining 2. Steve blocked the physical strikes but had to dodge the thrown blades. One passed so close it burned his cheek. The other carved through his leg, severing muscle. Steve collapsed to one knee, shield barely raised in time to catch Grievous's follow-up strike. "Finished," Grievous declared triumphantly. He called his thrown lightsabers back to his hands through magnetic grips built into his claws. "The galaxy watches you die, Captain America." A symbol shattered, a hope destroyed. This is what happens to those who oppose. An explosion rocked the arena's perimeter. Clone deserters had sabotaged droid ammunition stores, the blast chain reacting through Separatist positions. Battle droids sparked and fell, their formations disrupted. Grievous's head snapped toward the chaos, yellow eyes widening as he realized the hostages were gone. Tunnels evacuated, civilians escaping while he'd been distracted. "No!" Grievous roared, mechanical rage overriding combat discipline. He turned back to Steve, all 4 lightsabers raised. "You deceitful!" Steve threw his shield with the last of his strength. It struck Grievous's chest, ricocheted to hit his upper right arm, then his lower left, systematically striking joints and articulation points. The impacts weren't enough to break duranium, but they bent mechanisms, damaged actuators, compromised the cyborg's precision. Grievous's upper right arm froze at an awkward angle, servos grinding. He dropped one lightsaber, the blade deactivating as it fell. "You're not the only one with tricks," Steve gasped, catching his returning shield. He forced himself upright on his wounded leg, blood soaking through his uniform. Around them, the arena had descended into chaos. Clone deserters fighting battle droids, refugees escaping through tunnels, Separatist forces scrambling to restore order. But in the arena's center, it was just Steve and Grievous. One enhanced human with a shield, one cyborg general with 3 remaining lightsabers and absolute fury. "I'll tear you apart!" Grievous screamed, his vocabulator distorting the words into mechanical shrieking. He charged, throwing caution aside, all 3 lightsabers striking with murderous intent. Steve blocked the first strike, deflected the second, but the third caught his shield's edge at a perfect angle. The force drove him backward into the arena wall, stunning him. Grievous pressed the advantage, his working arms bringing lightsabers down in a coordinated strike aimed at Steve's head. A purple lightsaber intercepted the blow. Mace Windu materialized from the chaos, his blade catching Grievous's strikes with Jedi precision. "Captain Rogers, you look terrible." "Thanks for noticing," Steve wheezed, using the wall to stay upright. "Thought the council forbade intervention." "They did." Mace's lightsaber moved in precise Form 7 patterns, forcing Grievous back. "I'm officially acting without authorization. We'll call it a midlife crisis." Grievous snarled, redirecting his fury toward the Jedi Master. Windu! Finally, a worthy opponent. I'll add your lightsaber to my collection. The two warriors clashed in a display of speed and skill that made their earlier fights look amateur. Mace's Varpad form channeled aggression into devastating counterattacks, while Grievous's 3 remaining arms created overlapping strike zones no normal fighter could defend against. Purple plasma met blue, green, and yellow in a cascading series of impacts that sent shockwaves through the air. Steve watched, struggling to remain conscious. His enhanced healing was working, but not fast enough. The shoulder wound needed proper medical attention. The leg wound was worse, deep tissue damage that wouldn't heal without surgery. He'd lost too much blood, pushed his enhanced physiology too far. But the hostages were safe. 600 civilians evacuated while Grievous had been focused on their duel. That's what mattered. Mace drove Grievous back with a powerful force push, the cyborg general stumbling. But Grievous recovered quickly, his yellow eyes calculating. 2 Jedi, 1 enhanced human. Even I recognize unfavorable odds. He activated his wristcom. All units, tactical withdrawal. Level the settlement. Leave nothing standing. Vulture droids screamed overhead, their laser cannons targeting the settlement's buildings. Explosions erupted across the compound. Clone deserters scattered, dragging wounded through tunnels while droid forces retreated toward landing craft. Grievous ignited his cape's rocket pack, launching toward his flagship. This isn't over, Captain. We'll meet again, and next time there'll be no distractions. Mace moved to pursue, but Steve grabbed his arm. Let him go. We need to evacuate the wounded. Rogers, please. Steve's legs gave out, his enhanced body finally hitting its limits. Just help them. Mace caught him before he fell, supporting Steve's weight with surprising gentleness for a warrior known for his combat ferocity. You insane, suicidal fool. You nearly got yourself killed for these people. That's the job, Steve managed, his vision darkening around the edges. Someone has to stand. Consciousness fled. The last thing Steve heard was Mace calling for medical assistance, his voice mixing with explosions and the distant roar of Separatist ships fleeing into orbit. Steve woke to the familiar hum of back-to-tank life support systems. His body floated in translucent healing fluid, breathing apparatus secured to his face, medical sensors monitoring every biological function. Through the tank's transparasteel, he saw the Defiant's medical bay, cramped, cobbled together from salvaged equipment, but functional. Kix stood at the monitoring console, his face creased with exhaustion. Steve tapped the tank's interior. Kix looked up, relief flooding his features. He activated the drainage cycle, and the Bacta fluid receded. The tank opened with a hydraulic hiss, cool air hitting Steve's healing skin. He pulled off the breathing mask, coughing. Easy, sir, Kix said, wrapping a thermal blanket around Steve's shoulders. You've been under for 18 hours. Shoulder wounds healed, legs at 80%, ribs are solid again. Your enhanced physiology did most of the work. Bacta just accelerated the process. Steve flexed his left arm experimentally. The shoulder wound that should have taken weeks to heal had closed completely, leaving only a pink scar that would fade within days. His leg still ached, but the deep tissue damage had regenerated. Even his cracked ribs felt stable. The hostages? Steve asked immediately. All 600 evacuated safely, scattered across 7 systems: Mandalore, Onderon, Florum, others. Families are together, supplies distributed, temporary shelters established. Kix's expression darkened. But we lost 3 brothers in the fighting. Tracker, Patch, and Needle. They held the tunnel entrance so civilians could escape. Steve closed his eyes, grief hitting harder than Grievous's lightsabers. 3 more names added to the list of soldiers who'd followed him and paid the ultimate price. Their sacrifice saved 400 lives, Kix interrupted firmly. They knew what they were doing, sir. They chose it. Just like you taught us. Free men making free choices. The medical bay door opened. Rex entered, still wearing his combat armor. Dried blood spattered across the plates. Behind him came Fives, Jesse, and Hardcase, all wounded but mobile, all wearing expressions mixing relief and concern. "You're awake," Rex said, something unspoken, heavy in his voice. "Good. We need to talk. Now." Steve dressed in his spare uniform, wincing as fabric pulled against healing tissue. The crew compartment had been converted into a makeshift command center. Holographic displays showing news feeds from across the galaxy, tactical maps, intelligence reports. What Steve saw made his stomach drop. Every major news network was broadcasting footage of the Ord Mantell fight. Steve blocking Grievous's lightsabers. Steve being beaten down. Steve standing despite impossible wounds. And most damaging, Mace Windu arriving to help him. A Jedi Master defying Council orders to save a Republic fugitive. "The Chancellor is calling it Jedi treason," Fives said, pulling up Palpatine's official statement. The hologram showed the Chancellor addressing the Senate, his expression perfectly calibrated between concern and righteous anger. "Master Windu acted without authorization to assist a wanted terrorist. The Council is in emergency session debating his actions. Some senators are calling for Windu's expulsion from the Order." "That's insane," Steve protested. "He saved lives, helped evacuate civilians that Grievous was executing." "Doesn't matter," Rex said grimly. "The narrative isn't about saving hostages. It's about a Jedi helping you. A deserter who inspires clone rebellions and undermines military discipline. Palpatine's using this to drive a wedge between the Jedi and Senate." Steve studied Palpatine's holographic image, seeing past the grandfatherly concern to something colder underneath. The inhibitor chip files from Mustafar echoed in his mind. Control codes held by the Chancellor. Contingency orders designed to eliminate Jedi. A conspiracy decades in the making. This wasn't about Windu's insubordination. This was about isolating the Jedi, making them seem unreliable, preparing public opinion for something worse. "He's setting them up," Steve said quietly. "Palpatine, every move pushes the Jedi further outside the Republic's trust. When he finally activates Order 66, no one will question it," Jesse finished. "The Jedi will be seen as traitors who turned on the Republic. The clones executing them will be heroes following lawful orders." The compartment fell silent. They all understood what they were witnessing. The final stages of a conspiracy so vast it encompassed the entire galaxy, executed by someone patient enough to manipulate both sides of a war for years. "There's more," Rex said, pulling up another holofeed. "Dooku issued a statement praising Grievous for his tactical brilliance and condemning you as a Republic weapon. The Separatist Parliament is using the fight to justify increased aggression. They're calling it evidence that the Republic creates enhanced soldiers to terrorize civilian populations." "So, both sides are using Ord Mantell for propaganda," Steve said. "The Republic calls me a terrorist aided by rogue Jedi. The Separatists call me a Republic super soldier. Everyone ignores that I saved 600 lives." "Welcome to galactic politics," Hardcase muttered. "Truth is whatever powerful people say it is." Another holofeed activated, this one showing Jedi temple exteriors surrounded by Republic Guard units. The reporter's voice was measured, but the implications were clear. "Security has been increased around the Jedi Temple following Master Windu's unauthorized intervention on Ord Mantell. Chancellor Palpatine assures the Senate that the Jedi Order remains loyal to the Republic, but questions persist about their independence from proper oversight." "They're being caged," Steve said, understanding dawning. "Palpatine's using this to justify restrictions on Jedi autonomy. More guards, more oversight, more control. When Order 66 is transmitted, the Jedi will already be isolated, monitored, vulnerable. We have to warn them, Fives said. With what evidence they'll believe? Rex countered. We're deserters. Our testimony is worthless. The inhibitor chip data came from a Separatist facility. They'll say it's enemy propaganda. Even if Kix shows them the chip he removed from my head, they'll claim we tampered with it. Then we go public, Jesse suggested. Broadcast the chip evidence across every network. Make it impossible to ignore. And Palpatine controls the narrative, Steve said. He'll spin it as separatist misinformation designed to undermine clone loyalty, or he'll claim the chips are safety features beneficial to the clones. Without insider support, we're just terrorists making wild accusations. The tactical situation was impossible. They had evidence of a conspiracy, but no credibility to present it. They'd saved hundreds of lives, but both governments labeled them criminals. Steve had survived Grievous, but the fight had played into larger schemes he couldn't fully see. What do we do? Hardcase asked, the question hanging heavy. Steve looked at each face, Rex, Fives, Jesse, Hardcase, Kix. Clone deserters who'd become brothers, soldiers who'd chosen freedom over obedience, men who trusted him despite everything going wrong. We keep fighting, Steve said with certainty. We can't stop Palpatine's conspiracy yet. We're not strong enough. But we can save people caught in its gears. We evacuate more clone deserters. We help refugees. We document everything we find about the inhibitor chips and wait for the right moment to expose the truth. That could take years, Kix pointed out. Then we take years. This isn't about quick victories. It's about being ready when the chance comes. Steve pulled up star maps showing scattered refugee settlements and clone deserter cells across the outer rim. We build a network, connect resistance groups, teach clones how to remove their chips safely, create infrastructure for after the war, because when Palpatine's plan finally activates, survivors will need somewhere to go. An underground railroad, Rex said slowly, understanding, for clones escaping the war machine. Exactly. We can't win the war, but we can save whoever we reach. Steve looked at his brothers. I know it's not the heroic victory you wanted. It's just grinding work, small victories, constant danger, but it's what needs doing. Sir, Fives said, standing straighter, we didn't follow you for glory. We followed you because you showed us we were worth more than our programming. If the work is saving brothers one at a time, then that's the work we do. One by one. The others nodded agreement. They'd all given up everything, Republic service, guaranteed purpose, the only lives they'd known, to follow a soldier from another galaxy who'd told them they deserved freedom. Small victories were still victories. A proximity alert chimed. Rex checked sensors, his expression darkening. We've got company. 2 Republic Venator-class Star Destroyers just entered the system. They're broadcasting on Republic military channels, ordering us to power down and prepare for boarding. How did they find us? Jesse demanded. Doesn't matter, Steve said, grabbing his shield. We run. Rex, get us into hyperspace. Random coordinates, anywhere outside Republic space. Already plotting, Rex said, his hands flying across controls. The Defiance engines powered up, acceleration pressing them into seats. Through the viewport, the Venators grew larger, massive triangular warships bristling with turbo laser batteries. They're launching fighters, Fives reported. ARC-170s, V-wings, full squadrons. They're not taking chances. The Defiant shuddered as turbo laser fire grazed shields. Rex threw the gunship into evasive maneuvers, his clone pilot training pushing the vessel beyond design tolerances. Alarms shrieked. Shield indicators dropped into red. Another few hits and they'd be disabled, boarded, executed as deserters. Hyperspace calculation complete, Rex announced. Coordinates locked. Jumping in 3. A turbo laser bolt struck the hyperdrive. Sparks exploded across the engineering console. Warning klaxons blared as critical systems failed. The Defiant tumbled, losing attitude control, falling toward the system's asteroid field. Hyperdrive's dead, Kix shouted over the alarms. "Main power's failing! We're going down!" Steve strapped into the crash seat, shield held protectively across his chest. Through the viewport, asteroids rushed toward them with terminal velocity. Rex fought the controls, trying to stabilize their spin, but damaged maneuvering thrusters weren't responding. "Brace for impact," Rex ordered. The Defiant struck an asteroid with bone-jarring force. Metal screamed. Hull plating tore away. Steve felt himself thrown against restraints hard enough to crack normal ribs. The world became spinning chaos. Rock, stars, debris, emergency lighting strobing across terrified faces. Then darkness, silence. The smell of burnt circuits and leaking coolant. Steve forced his eyes open. They'd crashed in a crater on the asteroid's surface, the Defiant wedged between rock formations at an angle. Emergency life support was functioning, but main power was gone. Around him, his brothers groaned, checking for injuries. "Sound off," Steve ordered, his voice hoarse. Rex banged up but functional. "Fives, broken arm, nothing serious." "Jesse, concussion, I'll live." "Hard case, just pissed off we crashed." Kix treating fives, everyone else is stable. They'd survived, barely. But the Defiant wasn't flying again without major repairs they couldn't make here, and the Republic Venators were still out there, hunting. "They'll send boarding parties," Rex said, checking weapons. "Scan the asteroid, find our crash site, come in with overwhelming force. Then we need to disappear before they arrive," Steve said, forcing himself out of the crash seat. Every movement hurt, his recently healed injuries protesting the abuse. "Grab essential supplies, weapons, medical gear, food. We go underground, use the asteroid's tunnels to hide until we can signal for extraction." "Who's going to extract us?" Jesse asked. "Our whole network thinks we're dead." Steve had no answer for that. They were stranded on a barren asteroid, hunted by the Republic, with no ship and no backup. It was the worst tactical situation he'd faced since waking in this galaxy. But they were alive. They were together, and Steve Rogers had survived worse odds before. "We figure it out," he said with more confidence than he felt. "That's what we do." The asteroid's tunnels were remnants of old mining operations. Dark, cramped passages carved by beings long dead, now serving as a maze for fugitives fleeing the galaxy's most powerful military. Steve led his brothers deeper underground, using salvaged glow rods for illumination, every sound echoing with threatening potential. Behind them, Republic forces methodically searched the crash site. They'd been underground for 6 hours when Rex's salvaged scanner picked up movement. "Contact. 200 meters behind us, moving fast. Clone troopers, judging by the formation. They're tracking us," Fives said. His broken arm splintered but still painful. "Thermal signatures, probably. We're leaving heat trails they can follow." Steve studied the tunnel ahead. It branched into 3 directions, each equally dark and uninviting. A plan formed, desperate but possible. "Kix, how much coolant did we salvage from the ship?" "Maybe 10 liters. Why?" "Because we're going to give them a trail to follow." Steve quickly explained his idea. The clone deserters listened, nodded, understood. They'd fought together long enough to trust his tactical instincts, even when plans seemed suicidal. Jesse and Hardcase took the coolant, spreading it along the left tunnel's floor in patterns mimicking human heat signatures. Meanwhile, Steve and the others moved right, using reflective emergency blankets to mask their thermal profiles. It was a basic misdirection, the kind of trick that shouldn't work against trained soldiers. But it bought them 30 minutes while Republic forces pursued false trails. 30 minutes deeper into the asteroid's heart, where ancient mining equipment rusted in forgotten chambers. They emerged into a massive cavern, hundreds of meters across, its ceiling lost in shadow. Rusted mining mechs stood like mechanical corpses, their operators' skeletons still seated at controls. The air tasted stale, recycled through failing life support systems that had been abandoned decades ago. "We can hold here," Rex said, assessing defensive positions. "Limited access points, cover from the equipment, enough space to maneuver." "We're not holding," Steve said, studying the cavern's far wall. His enhanced vision picked out something the glow rods didn't illuminate clearly, a shaft leading upward, too regular to be natural. "That's a ventilation tunnel. Leads to the asteroid's surface. If we can reach it, we're exposed on an airless rock," Jesse pointed out. "They'll see us immediately. Better than being trapped underground when they seal the tunnels and pump in toxins." Steve had seen that tactic used before, cheaper than sending soldiers into close-quarters combat, effective against entrenched positions. The Republic wasn't above using it on their own deserters. Voices echoed from the tunnel behind them. The pursuers had realized the deception and were closing in. Clone troopers, their brothers, men with identical faces and training, now hunting them like animals because they'd chosen freedom. "Up we go," Steve ordered, starting to climb. The ventilation shaft was barely wide enough for armored shoulders, its interior slick with decades of condensation. Steve pulled himself hand over hand, shield strapped awkwardly to his back. Every meter gained through sheer upper body strength. Behind him, the clone deserters followed. Rex struggled with his armor's bulk. Fives climbed one-handed, his broken arm useless. Hardcase muttered curses with each pull. But they climbed because the alternative was capture, reconditioning, execution. They were 50 meters up when blaster fire erupted below. Republic forces had reached the cavern and spotted them. Bolts of energy screamed up the shaft, superheating the air, forcing the fugitives to climb faster. One bolt struck the shaft wall near Steve's head, showering him with molten metal droplets that seared through his uniform. "Keep moving," Steve shouted, though his arms burned with exertion. The shaft seemed endless, each meter harder than the last. Behind him, he heard kicks helping Fives, Jesse supporting Rex, brothers refusing to leave anyone behind, even as death chased them upward. The shaft opened onto the asteroid's surface, a barren landscape of craters and rock formations under the cold light of distant stars. No atmosphere, no sound except breathing, transmitted through helmet comms for those wearing them. Steve's uniform included an emergency rebreather, but it was designed for minutes, not hours. They had limited time before hypoxia killed them as surely as blaster fire. "There," Rex pointed to a structure a kilometer distant. "Emergency shelter. Mining operations always built them for surface teams. If it's still functional, then we have a chance," Steve finished. "Move." They ran across the asteroid's surface in the low gravity, each step covering meters, their bodies lighter but their desperation heavier. Behind them, Republic forces emerged from the ventilation shaft. Full environmental suits, military-grade equipment, numerical superiority. Blaster bolts tracked them across the barren terrain. One struck Hardcase's shoulder, spinning him around. Jesse caught him, dragged him forward, refused to let a brother fall. Another bolt missed Steve's head by centimeters, close enough that he felt the heat through his rebreather. The emergency shelter loomed ahead, a prefab structure half buried in asteroid dust, its walls scarred by decades of micrometeorite impacts. The door was sealed, its control panel dark. Steve slammed his shield against it with super soldier strength, once, twice, 3 times. The door buckled, then exploded inward. They piled inside, Rex immediately activating emergency systems. Ancient life support coughed to life, pumping thin but breathable atmosphere into the sealed chamber. The shelter was designed for 20 miners. 7 fugitives fit easily, but comfort wasn't the point. Survival was. "Seal the door," Steve ordered, bracing his shield against the entrance while Kix welded it shut with a plasma cutter. Outside, Republic forces surrounded the shelter, their weapons trained on every surface. Then a voice crackled through external speakers, not a clone captain or Republic officer. Chancellor Palpatine himself, transmitted via long-range hologram. "Captain Rogers," Palpatine said, his voice carrying false warmth. "You've led the Republic on quite a chase. Impressive, truly. But this ends here. You're surrounded, outnumbered, trapped in a shelter that won't survive sustained turbo-laser bombardment. Surrender yourself and your accomplices, and I promise they'll receive fair trials. Steve activated the shelter's external comm. Your promises mean nothing, Chancellor. I know about the inhibitor chips. I know about Order 66. I know you've been planning to betray the Jedi from the beginning. Silence. Then Palpatine's holographic image materialized inside the shelter, a trick of broadcasting technology that felt disturbingly intimate. The Chancellor's face showed no surprise, only cold calculation. Interesting, Palpatine said softly. The Mustafar facility. You acquired classified Separatist intelligence. How enterprising. His expression hardened. And how unfortunate. You understand I cannot allow such information to spread. The Jedi already know, Steve lied, hoping to buy time. Mace Windu has the evidence. By now the Council is investigating. Master Windu is currently under house arrest for his unauthorized intervention on Ord Mantell. His credibility with the Council has been severely damaged. Palpatine smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who'd already won. Even if he possessed such evidence, which I doubt, who would believe a Jedi acting in concert with wanted terrorists? Steve's blood ran cold. Palpatine had outmaneuvered them at every turn. The inhibitor chip evidence was worthless because anyone who could present it credibly had been discredited. Mace Windu was neutralized. The clone deserters were branded criminals. Even if they broadcast the truth across the galaxy, Palpatine controlled the narrative apparatus to dismiss it as separatist propaganda. "You can't win, Captain," Palpatine continued, his voice almost gentle. "Your resistance is courageous but futile. The Republic will become an empire. The Jedi will fall. Order will replace chaos. These are inevitabilities shaped by forces beyond your comprehension." "One man can make a difference," Steve said, though his conviction wavered. "I've proven that before. In your galaxy, perhaps. But this is mine." Palpatine's hologram leaned forward. "I've orchestrated this war for decades, manipulated both sides, positioned every piece, eliminated every threat. You're merely an unexpected variable, troublesome but ultimately irrelevant to the grand design." "Then why are you here?" Steve challenged. "If I'm irrelevant, why surround this shelter with forces? Why come personally to negotiate? You're afraid of something." Palpatine's smile vanished. "I fear nothing, but I dislike loose ends." He straightened. "Final offer, Captain Rogers. Surrender. Swear loyalty to me personally, not the Republic, not any government, but to me. And I'll give you a place in the coming order. Commander of my personal guard, a position of power and influence. Your clone deserters will receive amnesty and positions of honor." "Serve a dictator?" Steve laughed bitterly. "I've heard that pitch before, from Red Skull, from Hydra. The words change, but the song stays the same. Kneel before power or be destroyed." "And?" Palpatine asked. "And my answer is the same." Steve raised his shield. "I can do this all day." Palpatine's expression went utterly cold, all pretense of warmth evaporating. "Then you'll die on this rock, forgotten and futile. The galaxy will never know you existed. Your resistance will be a footnote, if that." The hologram vanished. Outside, heavy weapons powered up, Republic troops preparing for the final assault. Steve turned to his brothers, seeing their faces. Rex's determination, Fives's defiance, Jesse's quiet acceptance, Hardcase's grim smile, Kix's steady calm. "I'm sorry," Steve said. "I led you here, got you killed for—" "Don't," Rex interrupted. "We chose this, every step. You showed us what freedom meant, and we decided it was worth dying for. That's more than most clones ever get." "Brothers to the end," Fives said, checking his rifle with his good hand. "Damn right," Hardcase agreed. Before Steve could respond, the shelter's makeshift sensor array lit up with new contacts. Ships dropping out of hyperspace, dozens of them. Not Republic designs, not Separatist either. Mandalorian assault ships, Outer Rim freighters, and vessels Steve recognized from refugee convoys they'd helped evacuate. The comms crackled with a familiar voice. "Captain America, this is Pre Vizsla of Death Watch. Heard you could use an extraction." More voices joined in. Freed slaves from Zygeria, refugees from Ord Mantell, smugglers they'd worked with, even some Separatist deserters who'd abandoned Dooku's cause. A fleet of misfits and outcasts, all converging on the asteroid because word had spread that Captain America needed help. "The galaxy's watching, Chancellor." Pre Vizsla's voice carried across all frequencies. "Kill Captain Rogers, and you make him a martyr. Let him go, and you prove the Republic still has mercy." Palpatine's response was immediate. "This is an internal Republic matter. Foreign vessels will withdraw or be fired upon." "Then fire," Pre Vizsla said calmly. "But understand, every refugee he saved remembers. Every freed slave is watching. Every person tired of this war's corruption will see the Republic murder its greatest hero. You want to rule the galaxy, Chancellor? Rule ashes after we're done." The standoff stretched across minutes. Republic forces versus a ragtag fleet united only by gratitude toward one soldier who'd stood when others wouldn't. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of moment Steve had lived for across 2 galaxies. Finally, Palpatine's voice returned, dripping with controlled fury. "Stand down! Let them go!" "Chancellor!" a Republic officer protested. "I said stand down!" Palpatine's anger cracked through his composure for just a moment. "The political cost isn't worth this minor victory. We'll deal with Captain Rogers another way." The Republic forces withdrew, their ships entering hyperspace. Pre Vizsla's assault ship landed near the shelter, its boarding ramp extending. Steve and his brothers emerged, supporting each other, moving toward salvation they hadn't dared hope for. As they boarded, Steve looked back at the abandoned shelter, at the asteroid where they'd nearly died, at the Republic forces disappearing into hyperspace. Palpatine had let him go, but only because killing him publicly would create a symbol more dangerous than letting him live. But that meant Steve was now something new, not just a fugitive, but a rallying point, a symbol of resistance against corruption. Someone the galaxy's forgotten people looked to for hope. It was a responsibility heavier than any shield. 3 weeks after the asteroid standoff, Steve stood on the observation deck of a converted freighter drifting through the unknown regions, space so remote even the Republic's surveillance networks couldn't reach. Behind him, the makeshift fleet that had rescued them from certain death now operated as a mobile resistance network. Mandalorian warriors, freed slaves, clone deserters, refugees, hundreds of beings who'd found common cause in opposing both the Republic's corruption and the Separatists' brutality. Rex approached, carrying a datapad filled with intelligence reports. His armor now bore symbols from a dozen worlds, markings representing every life they'd saved, every brother freed from programming, every small victory against impossible odds. "Morning briefing, sir," Rex said, though rank had become increasingly informal among the resistance. "We've confirmed another 12 clone deserters successfully removed their inhibitor chips. Underground networks on Coruscant, Naboo, and Corellia are spreading the word. It's slow, but it's working." Steve nodded, studying the star map projection. Red markers indicated Republic territories, blue marked Separatist space. But growing clusters of green showed their network, hidden bases, sympathetic populations, extraction routes for those fleeing the war. It wasn't much against galactic superpowers, but it was something. "Any word on Mace Windu?" Steve asked. "Still under investigation by the Jedi Council. Officially, he's on sabbatical while they review his unauthorized actions." Rex's expression darkened. "Unofficially, Palpatine's using it to pressure the Council, proving they can't control their own members, making them seem unreliable to the Senate, setting them up for the fall, Steve said quietly. He'd studied the inhibitor chip data repeatedly, cross-referenced it with Separatist intelligence, and the picture became clearer with each analysis. Order 66 wasn't just a contingency, it was the endgame. When Palpatine activated it, millions of clone troopers would simultaneously execute their Jedi commanders across the galaxy. The Order would be destroyed in a single coordinated strike. "We still can't prove it," Rex said, reading Steve's thoughts. "We've got the chips, the technical data, but no way to present evidence that won't be dismissed as enemy propaganda or terrorist fabrication." "Then we keep preparing for when it happens," Steve replied. "How many Jedi have we managed to warn?" 17, through very quiet channels. Most don't believe us. A few, Master Plo Koon, Master Shakti, a couple others, are at least investigating, but the Council majority trusts the clones too much to see the threat. Steve understood. The Jedi had fought beside clone troopers for 3 years, watched them demonstrate loyalty and sacrifice repeatedly. Accepting that those same brothers had biological triggers to murder them required acknowledging a conspiracy so vast it shattered their worldview. "Keep trying," Steve said. "When Order 66 is transmitted, every Jedi we warned might survive. That's worth the effort." Fives entered the observation deck. His broken arm healed, carrying a salvaged holoprojector. "Cap, you need to see this. It just hit every news network in the galaxy." The hologram activated, showing Count Dooku standing in what appeared to be a Separatist Senate chamber. His aristocratic features were arranged in an expression of calculated concern. "Citizens of the Confederacy," Dooku began, "I come before you with troubling intelligence regarding the Republic's super soldier program. Captain America, the enhanced warrior the Republic claims is a rogue terrorist, is in fact their creation. Evidence acquired from Kamino reveals Republic scientists attempted to replicate his genetic enhancements to create an army of super soldiers." The hologram shifted to show falsified documents. Legitimate Kaminoan research mixed with fabricated authorization codes bearing Jedi signatures. Steve recognized some of the real data he'd destroyed on Kamino, now twisted and presented as proof of Republic conspiracy. "The Republic would have you believe they oppose Captain America," Dooku continued. "In truth, they fear losing control of their weapon, a weapon designed to terrorize Separatist populations, to inspire clone rebellions that give the Republic justification for increased militarization. Everything he does serves their agenda. Even his supposed desertion is theater designed to make him seem independent." "That's a lie," Jesse said, watching the broadcast with mounting anger. "We were there. We saw you destroy that research to prevent them from making more super soldiers." "Doesn't matter," Steve said heavily. "Dooku's giving the Separatists exactly what they want to hear. Confirmation that the Republic is more corrupt than they imagined, willing to create enhanced super soldiers as terror weapons. Truth is irrelevant when propaganda serves political purposes." The broadcast continued. "The Confederacy calls upon all neutral systems to recognize the danger. The Republic will not stop with clone armies. They seek to enhance their soldiers beyond natural limits, creating weapons that threaten all organic life. Captain America is merely their first prototype. Imagine what comes next." The hologram ended. Steve stood in silence, processing the implications. Both governments now used him as propaganda. The Republic called him a terrorist inspiring clone rebellion. The Separatists called him a Republic superweapon. The truth, that he was a displaced soldier trying to save lives, had been buried under layers of political narrative. "So what do we do?" Hardcase asked. "Both sides are lying about you, about us. How do we fight that?" "We don't," Steve said after a long moment. "We can't win the propaganda war. but we can keep saving people while both governments are distracted lying about us." He turned to Rex. "Status update on the Ryloth evacuation? 48 hours out. Local resistance has identified 300 Twi'lek civilians trapped behind Separatist lines. If we can get transports in, then we get transports in," Steve said firmly. "The galaxy can debate what I am while we do the actual work." Over the following days, the resistance network operated with quiet efficiency. They evacuated Ryloth civilians under cover of a Republic separatist skirmish, both governments too busy fighting each other to notice a third party saving lives. They intercepted a slave convoy headed for Zygeria, freeing 200 captives and sending them to safe houses across the Outer Rim. They contacted more clone deserters, spreading instructions for safely removing inhibitor chips through encrypted channels. Small victories, incremental progress, nothing that would stop Palpatine's grand conspiracy or prevent the coming catastrophe. But each life saved was a refutation of the narrative both governments pushed, that individuals didn't matter, that sacrifice for political power was necessary, that freedom required surrendering to authority. One evening, Kix approached Steve in the medical bay where he was reviewing casualty reports. The medic looked exhausted, having spent 18 hours straight treating wounded from the Ryloth extraction. "Sir, I've been analyzing the inhibitor chip data more carefully," Kix said, pulling up holographic brain scans. "There's something I missed initially. The chips aren't just programmed with Order 66. There are dozens of contingency orders, including Order 65. Remove the Supreme Chancellor," Steve recalled from his Mustafar data. Why would Palpatine program chips to remove himself? "Because he's not worried about Order 65, Kix said, zooming in on the chip's programming structure. "Look at the activation protocols. Most orders require specific codes transmitted through official channels. But Order 66 has something different. A biological trigger tied to Jedi presence. When activated, the chips don't just make clones follow orders. They make them perceive Jedi as existential threats, triggering automatic hostile responses." Steve's blood went cold as understanding hit. It's not about orders at all, it's about reprogramming perception. When Palpatine activates the chips, every clone in the galaxy will genuinely believe Jedi are traitors who must be killed immediately, Kix finished. They won't be following orders against their will. They'll be convinced they're saving the Republic from dangerous insurgents. The guilt, the moral weight, all gone because their reality will have been rewritten. The full horror of Palpatine's plan crystallized. Order 66 wasn't just betrayal. It was neurological warfare that would turn loyal soldiers into enthusiastic executioners while making them believe they were heroes. And afterward, those same clones would carry the psychological trauma of having murdered their commanders, never understanding they'd been programmed to do it. "Can we reverse it?" Steve asked desperately. "Once the chips are activated, can we deactivate them remotely?" No, activation is one way. Once the chips rewrite neurological pathways, the only solution is surgical removal, which we can't perform on millions of soldiers simultaneously. Kix's expression was haunted. "Sir, when Palpatine activates Order 66, we won't just lose the Jedi. We'll lose every clone who still has their chip. They'll become murderers and never know why." Steve gripped the medical bay's table, feeling the weight of impossible knowledge. They'd discovered the conspiracy's true scope, understood exactly how Palpatine planned to execute it, and remained completely powerless to stop it. Warning individual Jedi might save dozens. Removing chips from deserters might save hundreds. But millions of clones and thousands of Jedi would still die when Palpatine decided the time was right. "We keep doing what we can," Steve said finally, forcing strength into his voice he didn't feel. "We save who we can reach. We document everything for whoever survives. And when Order 66 happens, when Palpatine's conspiracy finally executes, We make sure there's somewhere for survivors to go. Rex entered the medical bay, his expression urgent. Sir, we've got a problem. The device we salvaged from the Mustafar facility, the one analyzing your arrival in this galaxy, Kix has been examining it further. And? Steve asked. And it's not just a scanner, it's a partial constructor. Rex pulled up technical schematics that made Steve's enhanced brain struggle to comprehend. The Separatists accidentally opened a dimensional rift to your universe. They've been trying to replicate it ever since. This device is their latest attempt, a prototype dimensional anchor that could theoretically create stable wormholes between universes. Steve's heart hammered. Could it send me home? Maybe, if we could power it, which we can't. It requires energy outputs equivalent to a star. But sir, there's more. Rex's voice dropped. The device has been transmitting data. Low-level signals we only just detected. Someone's been tracking it. Tracking us. Palpatine, Steve said with certainty. Probably. Which means he knows we have technology related to interdimensional travel. He knows you're not just an enhanced soldier. You're proof other universes exist. Rex met Steve's eyes. Sir, what if Palpatine's endgame isn't just conquering this galaxy? What if he wants to use you to access others? The implications were staggering. A Sith Emperor with the ability to cross dimensional barriers could threaten not just this galaxy, but infinite others. Steve's arrival hadn't been just a random accident. It had opened a door Palpatine now sought to walk through. We destroy the device, Steve said immediately. Right now, we can't risk. Alarms blared throughout the ship. Hardcase's voice crackled over comms. Contact! Multiple Star Destroyers dropping out of hyperspace. Republic fleet moving to intercept! Steve rushed to the bridge, Rex and Kix following. Through the viewport, he saw 6 Venator-class Star Destroyers emerging from hyperspace, surrounding the freighter and its small escort vessels. This wasn't a patrol that stumbled across them. This was a coordinated strike with overwhelming force. A holographic transmission activated. Chancellor Palpatine appeared, his expression pleasant but his eyes utterly cold. Captain Rogers, Palpatine said, you possess technology vital to Republic security. Surrender the dimensional device from Mustafar, and your fleet may depart peacefully. Refuse, and I'll take it from your wreckage. Steve looked at his brothers, at the refugees and former slaves who'd found sanctuary in this fleet, at everything they'd built despite impossible odds. Palpatine had tracked them to the galaxy's edge and brought enough firepower to obliterate them completely. The device is destroyed, Steve lied, hoping to buy time. I very much doubt that, Palpatine replied. But we'll verify personally. You have 2 minutes to surrender. After that, my fleet opens fire. The transmission ended. Steve turned to Rex. Options? We can't fight 6 Star Destroyers. We can't outrun them. They'll pick us off in hyperspace. And we can't hide. They've got our position locked. Rex's voice was steady despite the death sentence they faced. Sir, we're out of moves. Steve looked at the dimensional device sitting in its containment field. A piece of technology representing both his only possible path home and a threat to every universe if Palpatine acquired it. He looked at his brothers, at the refugees, at everyone who'd followed him into this impossible fight. Then he made the only choice that mattered. 5's Jesse. Get everyone to escape pods, scatter in every direction. Make it impossible for the Republic to track you all. He turned to Rex. You're taking command after I'm gone. Keep the Resistance alive. Keep removing chips. And when Order 66 happens, save whoever you can. So what are you? I'm surrendering, Steve said. Me and the device in exchange for letting the fleet go. Palpatine wants the technology and wants me dead. If I give him both, he has no reason to chase you. That's suicide, Kix protested. That's leadership, Steve corrected. I won't let everyone die because Palpatine wants revenge on me. He activated the comm system. Chancellor, I accept your terms. I surrender myself and the device. Let my people go. Palpatine's hologram materialized, satisfaction evident despite his controlled expression. "Wise choice, Captain. Your fleet may depart once you're in Republic custody. You have my word. Your word," Steve said flatly. "Like your word that the clone army was voluntary. Like your word that the Republic serves justice. Your word isn't worth much, Chancellor." "Perhaps not," Palpatine agreed. "But you're out of alternatives. Prepare to be boarded." The transmission ended. Around Steve, his brothers protested, argued, refused to abandon him. But Steve had already made peace with his decision. He'd survived World War II, the Battle of New York, Thanos, and 3 months in an alien galaxy. Maybe this was where his story ended, captured by a Sith Lord who wanted to use him to threaten infinite universes. Or maybe this was where the real fight began. As Republic boarding craft approached, Steve Rogers gripped his shield and whispered to himself, "I can do this all day." Whatever came next, imprisonment, execution, escape, he'd face it the way he'd faced everything else. Standing, fighting, never surrendering the principles that made him Captain America across every universe. The galaxy hadn't seen the last of him yet. The hollow projectors across the outer rim flickered with scattered reports, fragments of truth buried beneath propaganda. The Republic called Captain America a terrorist in custody. The Separatists called him a failed experiment awaiting execution. But in refugee camps and clone deserter cells, in freed slave colonies and resistance hideouts, they knew different. They'd seen him stand alone against impossible odds. They'd watched him sacrifice himself so others could escape. They'd learned from him that freedom wasn't given by governments. It was claimed by individuals willing to fight for it. Rex and the Resistance scattered across the unknown regions, taking with them the knowledge of inhibitor chips, the evidence of Palpatine's conspiracy, and the example of one soldier who'd shown them they were more than property. They couldn't stop Order 66. They couldn't prevent the Jedi's fall or the Republic's transformation into Empire. But they could build something for after. A network of free clones who'd removed their chips. A refuge for Jedi who survived the Purge. A resistance waiting for the moment when tyranny overreached and the galaxy remembered what freedom meant. Steve Rogers remained in Republic custody, his fate uncertain, his dimensional device confiscated. Palpatine had won this round, acquired dangerous technology, and neutralized a persistent threat to his plans. But the Sith Lord made one critical miscalculation. He assumed imprisonment would break Steve Rogers. That torture or manipulation or the sheer weight of galactic-scale conspiracy would crush his spirit. He was wrong. In his cell aboard the Republic detention ship, Steve Rogers did push-ups and remembered Brooklyn, remembered Peggy, remembered every person he'd fought to protect across 2 galaxies and 80 years. The dimensional device might give Palpatine access to other universes, but it would also bring Steve closer to understanding how he'd arrived, and, potentially, how he might return. The war continued. The conspiracy advanced, but Captain America hadn't finished fighting. Because some people stand, some people fight, some people refuse to kneel no matter how dark the galaxy becomes, and that made all the difference. May the Force be with you. More stories await.